Nero Wolfe and a matter of honor. It was a Wednesday in October, and the kind of morning that makes you glad you live in Manhattan instead of some place where the air doesn't have any character. The leaves in the park were turning copper and gold. The sky was that hard, brilliant blue you only get in autumn, and I'd just come back from walking the dogs around the block, all 6 of them moving like a small, disciplined army, with Caesar at the point and Loyal bringing up the rear. When we got back to the brownstone at 900 West 35th Street, Fritz was waiting at the door with his usual precision. He had coffee ready, fresh croissants on the warming tray, and that particular expression on his face that meant someone was coming who wasn't going to make Wolfe's day any better. "Mr. Archie," he said in his careful English, reaching down to pat Diana's sleek head as she slipped past him. "A gentleman telephoned, Mr. Harrison Pembroke. He wishes to call at 11 o'clock. I told him Mr. Wolfe would be with the plants until then, but he insisted it was urgent." Pembroke? I hung up my coat and watched the dogs settle into their usual positions. Caesar near the front door, Mars by the stairs, Apollo already checking the windows that faced the street. Minerva had padded toward the kitchen, probably looking for Fritz, while Diana circled the office door and, Loyal as always, found the spot where he could see both the front entrance and the hallway to the back. "Never heard of him," he said. "It concerns his brother-in-law, a man named Colonel Andrew Fairchild." That name I knew. Everybody knew it. Colonel Andrew Fairchild, decorated war hero, currently being talked about as a potential candidate for governor, maybe even higher. The newspapers loved him, honest, principled, the kind of man who made patriotism sound like something real, instead of just a word politicians threw around. Did he say what about Fairchild? No, sir. Only that it was a matter of honor. I poured myself coffee and took a croissant. Through the bulletproof windows, installed 2 years ago, after an incident Wolfe still refused to discuss, the morning light came in clean and sharp. "All right, 11 o'clock. But if Wolfe's in a mood, I'm blaming you." Fritz smiled faintly. "Mr. Wolfe is always in a mood before lunch, Mr. Archie." He had a point. At 11 sharp, the doorbell rang. Fritz went to answer it while I sat at my desk in the office, pretending to work on the germination records Wolfe had asked me to type up. Through the one-way glass panel beside the door, another security feature Wolfe had insisted on, I could see our visitor. Harrison Pembroke was somewhere in his middle 50s, tall and lean, with the kind of face that probably looked distinguished even when he was 20. Grey suit, conservative tie, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hat was a Borsalino, and he carried a thin leather briefcase. When Fritz opened the door, Pembroke removed his hat automatically, the gesture so ingrained it was probably unconscious. The dogs had already assessed him. Caesar had risen to his feet but hadn't moved forward, a sign Pembroke wasn't an immediate threat. Mars stood behind Caesar, ready but not aggressive. Apollo watched from his position near the window, ears forward. Diana had moved to the archway between the hall and the office, her dark eyes tracking every movement. Minerva emerged from the kitchen, positioning herself to cut off the route to the stairs, and Loyal just watched with those intelligent brown eyes of his, measuring, remembering. Fritz showed Pembroke to the office. I stood up and offered my hand. "Mr. Pembroke, I'm Archie Goodwin. Mr. Wolfe will be down shortly. He's with his orchids until 11, and nothing short of the building catching fire will get him down early." Pembroke's handshake was firm, dry, exactly what you'd expect. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Goodwin. I know this is an imposition. That's what we're here for. Please sit down." I gestured to the red leather chair positioned in front of Wolfe's desk. Pembroke sat, placing his briefcase on his lap and his hat on the small table beside the chair. He glanced at the dogs, now arranged in their various positions around the room. "Quite a security system you have," he said. "They're family," I said. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Fritz makes it better than most restaurants charge 5 times as much for." "No, thank you." He paused, fingers drumming once on the briefcase, then stopping as if he'd caught himself doing something undisciplined. "Mr. Goodwin, I should tell you immediately, I'm here because my brother-in-law is going to be accused of murder, and I don't believe he did it." I sat down at my desk and got out my notebook. "That's direct. Who's he supposed to have killed?" "A man named Marcus Henley. He was found dead in his apartment on Monday night, shot once in the chest at close range. And your brother-in-law is Colonel Andrew Fairchild." I'd already known that. but hearing it confirmed still had weight. The newspapers haven't mentioned Fairchild in connection with any murder. Not yet. The police are being careful, discreet, but they will. Henley was blackmailing Andrew, Mr. Goodwin, or trying to, and Andrew had been to see him the night he died. What was Henley blackmailing him about? Pembroke's jaw tightened. Something that happened during the war. In Germany, right after the surrender. Something Andrew would never do, but something that Henley claimed to have evidence of. He wanted $50,000. I whistled softly. That's real money. Yes, Andrew refused to pay. He said he wouldn't be extorted for something he didn't do, that his honor wouldn't permit it. He went to Henley's apartment Monday evening to tell him so, face to face. When he left, Henley was alive. When the landlady found him Tuesday morning, he was dead. What time was Fairchild there? He arrived at 8:30. He left at 9:15. He went straight home afterward. His wife, my sister, can verify that. And what time was Henley killed? The police estimate between 9 and 10:30. So Fairchild left, and sometime in the next hour and 15 minutes, somebody shot Henley. Exactly. I looked up from my notebook. Mr. Pembroke, you seem like an intelligent man. You know how this looks. I do, which is why I'm here. The police are going to focus on Andrew. He had motive. Henley was threatening to destroy his reputation. He had opportunity. He was there that evening. And they'll say he had means. Andrew owns several guns, including a Colt .45 automatic, the same caliber that killed Henley. Has Fairchild given this gun to the police? No, because it's missing. It was in his study at home on Sunday. By Monday afternoon it was gone. That was getting worse by the minute. Stolen? Perhaps. Or perhaps someone borrowed it without asking, intending to frame Andrew for murder. Who has access to his study? Family, household staff, a few close friends and associates. Pembroke leaned forward slightly. Mr. Goodwin, my brother-in-law is not a perfect man, but he's an honorable one. He fought in North Africa and France. He was decorated for valor 3 times. He spent the years since the war trying to serve his community and his country. He would never murder a blackmailer, no matter how much that man threatened him, even if his career was at stake. Especially then, because to do so would prove he had no honor at all. It was a good speech. Whether it was true remained to be seen. I heard the elevator door open in the hall, Wolfe coming down from the plant rooms. A moment later, he entered the office. Nero Wolfe is a large man. I've given up trying to describe him in modest terms. He's a 1/7 of a ton, most of it in the torso, and he moves with the careful precision of someone who knows exactly how much space he occupies. His face is round, his eyes are half closed most of the time, and when he's annoyed, which is frequently, he pushes his lips in and out like a fish. He was doing that now as he crossed to his desk, nodded microscopically at Pembroke, and lowered himself into the only chair on earth designed to hold him comfortably. "Mr. Pembroke," he rumbled, "you have a problem involving your brother-in-law." It wasn't a question. Fritz had obviously briefed him. "Yes, Mr. Wolfe, Colonel Andrew Fairchild is about to be arrested for a murder he didn't commit. I need your help to prove his innocence." Wolfe's eyes opened slightly. "I am not a private investigator, Mr. Pembroke. I am a detective. I solve puzzles. If your brother-in-law is innocent, the puzzle is who killed Marcus Henley and why. But before I agree to involve myself, I require certain information. Of course. First, your brother-in-law's fee. What is he prepared to pay?" Pembroke didn't hesitate. "Whatever is necessary. Andrew has means, and I have more. If you solve this and clear his name, money will not be an issue. A specific figure, please. $10,000 as a retainer. Another 20 when the case is closed." I saw Wolfe's eyes flicker. That was serious money, even for us. But he gave no other sign. "Second, access. I will need to speak with your brother-in-law, his wife, his household, and anyone else relevant to this matter. You'll have it. Third, full disclosure. If you lie to me, even by omission, I will withdraw immediately and keep the retainer." Understood. Wolfe leaned back. Caesar had moved closer during the conversation, and now sat near Wolfe's desk, watching Pembroke with alert attention. Loyal had shifted position too, angling himself so he could see both the visitor and the door. "Very well," Wolfe said. "Now tell me everything." Start with what Henley claimed to have evidence of. Pembroke took a breath. In April of 1945, Colonel Fairchild was commanding a battalion in Germany, near a town called Schoenfeld. They'd just liberated the area from retreating German forces. Henley, who was a sergeant in Fairchild's battalion, claims that Andrew executed 3 captured German officers in cold blood, shot them personally, without trial, without provocation. He says he witnessed it, and has photographs to prove it. And did Colonel Fairchild do this? Absolutely not. Andrew is many things, but he's not a war criminal. He followed the Geneva Convention scrupulously. If German officers died in his custody, it would have been documented, investigated, recorded. There's no record of any such incident. Wolfe's eyes had closed again. Yet Henley claims to have photographs. Yes. Have you seen them? No. Andrew refused to even look when Henley tried to show him. Foolish, Wolfe murmured. One should always know what weapon is being aimed at one's head. Mr. Goodwin, your notebook. I was already there. Got it. We need the names of everyone in Colonel Fairchild's household. Everyone who had access to his study. Everyone who knew about Henley's blackmail attempt. And I need to know where Marcus Henley lived, who found his body, and what the police know so far. Pembroke provided the information methodically. Fairchild lived on East 68th Street, a townhouse he'd bought after the war. His household consisted of himself, his wife, Catherine Pembroke, Fairchild, their daughter Julia, age 19, a housekeeper named Mrs. Dorothy Brennan, a cook named Agnes Walsh, and a driver-handyman named Patrick Corrigan. The study was on the ground floor, accessible from both the main hallway and a side door that led to a small garden. Henley had lived alone in a 4th-floor walk-up on West 49th Street. His landlady, a Mrs. Edith Casper, had found him Tuesday morning when he didn't come down for the mail. She'd called the police. They'd found Henley on his living room floor, shot once through the heart. No signs of struggle, no murder weapon found at the scene. The police investigator in charge was Inspector Lionel Kramer. That got my attention. Kramer, he's on this personally? Yes, I believe because of who Andrew is. The department wants to handle it carefully. Wolfe grunted. Inspector Kramer is competent, honest, and deeply resentful of my existence. His involvement will complicate matters. He paused. Has he questioned your brother-in-law? Yesterday afternoon, Andrew told him everything about the blackmail, about going to see Henley, about the missing gun. Kramer told him not to leave the city. Sensible advice. Wolfe rang the bell on his desk. 2 short rings. Fritz appeared almost immediately. Beer, please, Fritz. Mr. Pembroke, you're certain you won't have anything? No, thank you. Very well. Mr. Goodwin will need to speak with your brother-in-law today. This afternoon, if possible. I'll also need a complete list of everyone who served in Fairchild's battalion during the war, particularly anyone who might corroborate or dispute Henley's claims. I can get that. Excellent. Fritz returned with 2 bottles of beer on a tray. Remmers, Wolfe's current favorite. Wolfe opened one, poured it carefully, and drank. One final question, Mr. Pembroke. Why didn't you go to the police with this theory about someone framing your brother-in-law? I did. Inspector Kramer listened politely and told me that the evidence pointed to Andrew. That speculation about mysterious conspirators didn't change the facts. He said if I had proof someone else was involved, he'd be happy to hear it, but speculation wasn't enough. He's right, of course. It isn't. Wolfe drank more beer. Which is why you need me. I don't deal in speculation, Mr. Pembroke. I deal in certainty. If someone framed your brother-in-law, I'll prove it. If he killed Marcus Henley, I'll prove that too. Are we agreed? Pembroke's face had gone very still. I'm hiring you to prove Andrew's innocence. You're hiring me to find the truth. Sometimes those are the same thing. Sometimes they're not. For a long moment, Pembroke said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. We're agreed. Good. Mr. Goodwin, make the arrangements. I want to see Colonel Fairchild at 2:30 this afternoon, here in this office. Also Mrs. Fairchild and the daughter if they're willing. Mr. Pembroke, you'll provide the retainer in the form of a check before you leave. Of course. Wolfe finished his beer and reached for the second bottle. The interview was over. Pembroke stood, collected his hat and briefcase, and I walked him to the front door. As we passed through the hall, Caesar and Mars shadowed us at a distance, not threatening, just maintaining their territorial awareness. Loyal stayed in the office with Wolfe. At the door, Pembroke paused. "Mr. Goodwin, do you believe Andrew is innocent?" "I believe Mr. Wolfe will find out what happened. That's what we do. But you must have an opinion." I looked at him. "In my experience, Mr. Pembroke, innocent men don't usually have guns go missing right before somebody they have a grudge against gets shot with that same caliber weapon. But I've been wrong before." He didn't like that, but he didn't argue. He wrote out a check for $10,000, handed it to me, and left. I went back to the office. Wolfe was staring at the orchid arrangement Fritz had placed on his desk that morning. A spray of Phalaenopsis stuartiana, white with purple spots. "Well," I said. "Arrange the meeting with Colonel Fairchild," Wolfe said without looking up, "and telephone Inspector Kramer. Tell him we've been retained in the matter, and request whatever cooperation he's willing to provide. You know Kramer. He won't give us anything. On the contrary, he'll give us exactly what he wants us to have, which will tell us what he thinks. That in itself is information." Wolfe's eyes opened and focused on me. "This is a disagreeable case, Archie. Because Fairchild might actually be guilty? Because if he is, a war hero's reputation will be destroyed. And if he isn't, someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to destroy it anyway. Either way, honor, that nebulous concept men kill and die for, will be at the center of it." He pushed his lips out, then in. "I dislike cases involving honor. People who are obsessed with it are invariably irrational. You're Montenegrin. Don't you people practically invented honor codes? Precisely why I know how dangerous they are. Now go, we have work to do." I went to my desk and started making phone calls. Caesar settled near Wolfe's chair, and I noticed Wolfe's hand drop down briefly to touch the dog's broad head. An absent gesture, almost unconscious. Outside the bulletproof windows, Manhattan went about its business, indifferent to questions of honor, innocence, and murder. But in the brownstone on West 35th Street, we were just getting started. Getting through to Inspector Kramer took 20 minutes and 3 different people at the precinct. When he finally came on the line, his voice had that particular quality of controlled irritation that meant he'd been expecting my call and dreading it. "Goodwin, I assume Wolfe's gotten himself involved in the Fairchild case. We've been retained by Harrison Pembroke. He seems to think his brother-in-law didn't murder Marcus Henley. Families usually think that. I heard paper rustling. Tell Wolfe he's wasting his time and Pembroke's money. We've got motive, opportunity, and the murder weapon was the same caliber as a gun. Fairchild owns. That's conveniently missing. The DA's going to move on this soon. Fairchild says the gun was stolen. Convenient timing. Inspector, you know Wolfe. He's going to investigate whether you cooperate or not. Wouldn't it be easier to share information and avoid stepping on each other's toes?" Kramer made a sound that might have been a laugh or a snarl. "Fine. Come down to the precinct at 4 o'clock. I'll give you 20 minutes. He hung up before I could thank him. I added it to my mental list of things to do. 2:30 meeting with Fairchild here at the brownstone. 4 o'clock meeting with Kramer at the precinct. Next, I called the Fairchild residence. A woman answered. Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper. Based on Pembroke's description, she had the kind of voice that suggested years of answering phones for people who thought they were more important than they actually were. Fairchild residence. "This is Archie Goodwin calling for Colonel Fairchild. Mr. Harrison Pembroke asked me to contact the Colonel regarding a meeting this afternoon." "One moment, please." The line went quiet. Through the office window I could see Diana making her patrol of the front room, checking the bulletproof windows with her usual systematic precision. Apollo had taken up a position near the front door, and I could hear Mars somewhere upstairs, probably checking the upper floors. A man's voice came on the line. "This is Andrew Fairchild." It was a good voice, deep, clear, with the kind of measured cadence that suggested he'd given speeches and testified before committees. A voice you'd trust. "Colonel Fairchild, I'm Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. Your brother-in-law retained us this morning regarding the Marcus Henley situation." "Yes, Harrison told me he was going to do that." "I'm not sure it's necessary, Mr. Goodwin. I've told the police everything. I have nothing to hide." "That may be, but Mr. Wolfe would like to speak with you regardless. Would 2:30 this afternoon be convenient? Here at Mr. Wolfe's office." There was a pause. "I'd prefer to come alone. My wife and daughter have been through enough already." Mr. Wolfe specifically requested to speak with them as well, if they're willing, but it's not required. Another pause, longer this time. Very well, we'll all come, 2:30. The address is 918 West 35th Street. I know where Nero Wolfe lives, Mr. Goodwin. Everyone does. He hung up with the same abruptness Kramer had used. I was starting to feel like a telephone operator nobody wanted to talk to. I reported to Wolfe, who had finished his second beer and was reading a book, something in French about the cultivation of Belgian endive. Fairchild and family at 2:30. I said, Kramer at 4. You want me to do anything else before then? Yes. Telephone Saul Panzer. I want him to visit the building where Henley lived. Talk to the landlady, the other tenants, anyone who might have seen something Monday night. Also have him examine Henley's apartment if the police haven't sealed it. They probably have. Then have him examine it anyway. Saul is resourceful. That was true. Saul Panzer was the best freelance operative in New York. Maybe anywhere. If there was something to find, he'd find it. I called Saul and gave him the assignment. He didn't ask questions, just confirmed the address and said he'd report back by early evening. That was another thing about Saul. He never wasted time on unnecessary conversation. With that done, I had a couple hours to kill. I spent them typing up the plant records Wolfe wanted, taking the dogs out for another walk around the block, and thinking about Colonel Andrew Fairchild. War hero, potential governor, decorated for valor, the kind of man who should be above suspicion. But I've learned that should be, and is, are two different things. At 2:25, the doorbell rang. Fritz answered it while I watched through the one-way glass. There were three of them, a tall man in his early 50s, ramrod straight, with iron-grey hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. A woman about 10 years younger, elegant in a navy dress and pearls, with dark hair going silver at the temples, and a girl, young woman, really maybe 19, with her mother's dark hair and her father's strong jaw. Colonel Andrew Fairchild, Mrs. Catherine Fairchild, and their daughter Julia. The dogs reacted immediately. Caesar rose from his position near the office door, ears forward, assessing. Mars moved to flank him. Apollo appeared from the front room, and Diana ghosted in from the kitchen. Minerva emerged from somewhere upstairs, and Loyal simply stood up from his spot near my desk, watching. It was the full-pack response. Not aggressive, but definitely attentive. Fritz opened the door. Good afternoon, please come in. The Fairchilds entered. I saw the Colonel's eyes take in the dogs with the kind of quick tactical assessment you'd expect from a military man. 6 guard dogs, positioned strategically, watching every move. Most people would have been nervous. Fairchild just nodded slightly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. Impressive, he said quietly. Fritz took their coats. Mr. Wolfe is in the office. Please follow me. As they came down the hall, the dogs parted to let them through, all except Caesar, who stayed planted in the office doorway until the visitors had passed, then took up a new position near the corner, where he could watch both the hallway and the office. It was the kind of tactical repositioning that would have made a chess master proud. Wolfe was at his desk, a fresh bottle of beer already opened. He didn't stand. He never does for anyone except women he respects. And he hadn't decided about Mrs. Fairchild yet. But he did nod. Colonel, Mrs. Fairchild, Miss Fairchild, please be seated. There was only one red leather chair, so I'd brought in 2 more from the front room. The Colonel waited until his wife and daughter were seated, before taking his own chair. Old-school manners. Mr. Wolfe, the Colonel said, my brother-in-law tells me you've agreed to look into this situation with Marcus Henley. I've agreed to investigate his murder. Yes, whether that will exonerate you remains to be seen. Mrs. Fairchild's back stiffened. My husband is innocent, Mr. Wolfe. That is your opinion, madam. I deal in evidence. Wolfe's eyes shifted to the Colonel. Your brother-in-law has provided the basic facts. I need to hear them from you directly, with whatever additional detail you can provide. Fairchild nodded. What do you want to know? Start with Marcus Henley. Who was he? A sergeant in my battalion during the war, B Company, 44th Infantry Regiment. He served under me from North Africa, through France, and into Germany. He was a competent soldier, not exceptional, but reliable enough. Did you know him well? No, I commanded over 800 men at various times. I knew my officers well. The enlisted men less so unless they distinguished themselves in some way. Henley didn't. When did you last see him before this recent contact? May 1945. The war in Europe ended, and the battalion was being reorganized for occupation duty. I rotated home in June. I never saw Henley again until 3 weeks ago. Wolfe drank beer. Tell me about that meeting. Fairchild's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his composure. He telephoned my office, said he had information about something that happened during the war, something that would interest me. We met for coffee at a restaurant near Grand Central. What did he tell you? He said that in April 1945, near a town called Schoenfeld, I had executed 3 German officers, shot them personally while they were prisoners. He claimed to have photographs proving it, and said he'd kept quiet for years, but now he needed money, $50,000. And your response? I told him he was a liar, that no such thing had ever happened, that I'd never executed prisoners, and that if he had photographs they were fraudulent. Did he show you these photographs? He tried. I refused to look. I wasn't going to dignify his lies by examining forged evidence. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. Colonel, that was foolish. How can you refute evidence you haven't examined? Because I know it's false. Fairchild's voice had risen slightly. His daughter reached over and touched his arm, and he took a breath. I'm sorry, but I know my own actions, Mr. Wolfe. I was there. I know what I did and didn't do. Looking at fake photographs wouldn't change that. Perhaps not, but it would have told you what your enemy was using as ammunition. Mrs. Fairchild spoke up. Mr. Wolfe, my husband is an honorable man. He spent his entire life in service to his country, to his community. The idea that he would execute prisoners is obscene. I'm sure it is, madam, but obscene ideas become dangerous when someone has apparent evidence to support them. Wolfe turned back to the colonel. What happened after you refused to pay? Henley gave me a week to reconsider, said he'd contact me again. He did. 3 days ago, Sunday. He called the house and said if I didn't pay by the end of the week, he'd take the photographs to the newspapers. And you decided to confront him in person? Yes, Monday evening. I went to his apartment to tell him face to face that I wouldn't be blackmailed, that I didn't care what fabricated evidence he thought he had. What time did you arrive? 8:30. I took a taxi from my office. And you left when? 9:15. I know because I looked at my watch when I left the building. I wanted to document the timeline. Very methodical. What happened during those 45 minutes? Fairchild's hands, which had been resting calmly on the arms of his chair, tightened slightly. We argued. I told him again that his claims were lies, that I wouldn't pay. He laughed at me, said honor wouldn't protect me from scandal, that the newspapers wouldn't care whether the photographs were real or fake. The accusation alone would destroy my career. Was he armed? Not that I saw. Did he threaten you physically? No. He was confident, smug. He thought he had me trapped. But he didn't? No, because I wasn't going to pay. Not a cent. I told him to do his worst. Fairchild's voice was cold now. And then I left. When I walked out of that apartment, Marcus Henley was alive, sitting in his chair, drinking whiskey and gloating. Can anyone corroborate this? No. We were alone. Did anyone see you leave the building? I don't know. Possibly. It was a walk-up, and there were other apartments. Someone might have seen me on the stairs. Wolfe nodded slowly. And when you returned home? I went straight there. Arrived around 9:30. Catherine can confirm it. Mrs. Fairchild nodded. He came home, told me what had happened, and we discussed what to do. We decided to wait and see if Henley actually followed through on his threats. But before you could find out, Henley was murdered. Yes, with a gun the same caliber as one you own. The colonel's face went hard. A gun that was stolen from my study sometime between Sunday afternoon and Monday evening. Someone took it deliberately, Mr. Wolfe. Someone who wanted to frame me for Henley's murder. Do you have any idea who? No. Who had access to your study? My family, the household staff, a few close associates and friends who've been to the house. I'll need a complete list. I've already given one to the police. Then you can give one to Mr. Goodwin as well. Wolfe paused. This thing Henley accused you of, executing prisoners. Did anything remotely similar happen near Schoenfeld in April 1945? Fairchild was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. There was an incident, not executions, but deaths. 3 German officers were killed while in our custody. But it wasn't murder, Mr. Wolfe. It was self-defense. Now we were getting somewhere. Explain, Wolfe said. Colonel Fairchild leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped between his knees. His daughter was watching him with an expression that suggested she'd never heard this story before. We took Schoenfeld on April 18th, he said. There wasn't much resistance. Most of the German forces had already retreated or surrendered. But we captured several officers who'd been coordinating the withdrawal. Standard procedure was to secure them, document them, and send them back to the divisional holding area. But, Wolfe prompted, but one of them, a captain named Werner Kessler, decided he wasn't finished fighting. We had them in a farmhouse on the edge of town under guard. 6 prisoners, 4 guards. Kessler somehow got hold of a knife. We never figured out how, and he attacked, killed one of my men, wounded another. In the chaos, 2 other German officers tried to escape. My guards opened fire. All 3 Germans died. And this was investigated thoroughly. The divisional commander personally reviewed it. It was determined that my men acted appropriately under the circumstances. Kessler's attack was documented. The deaths were ruled justified. It was all in the official record. Wolfe's eyes had opened slightly. Yet Henley claimed to have photographs of you executing these men, which would have to be fabrications. I wasn't even present when it happened. I was at battalion headquarters, 2 miles away. I didn't arrive at the farmhouse until after it was over. Who was present? Lieutenant James Hartwell was the officer in charge. Sergeants Henley, Frank Morrison, and Thomas Kellerman. Private David Chen. Those were the guards. Hartwell and Morrison are both dead now. Hartwell died in Korea. Morrison in a car accident in '48. Chen moved to California, last I heard. Kellerman lives in Boston. I was taking notes, getting all the names down. Wolfe drank more beer. And you're certain Henley was one of the guards? Yes, he was there. He witnessed the whole thing. Then he would know you weren't present during the actual shooting. He would know it, yes. Which means his photographs, if they exist, are either staged or doctored somehow. Maybe he found someone who looked like me, or altered images from the aftermath. I don't know. But they can't be real. Mrs. Fairchild spoke again. Mr. Wolfe, someone is trying to destroy my husband's reputation. First with false accusations, now by framing him for murder. You must find out who. That is my intention, madam. Wolfe turned his attention to Julia Fairchild, who'd been silent throughout. Miss Fairchild, do you have anything to add? She looked startled at being addressed directly. Me? No, I wasn't even born when the war happened, and I didn't know about the blackmail until Monday night, when father came home. But you live in the house. You might have noticed something. Someone behaving unusually. A visitor who seemed out of place. Julia bit her lip, thinking. There was no, it's probably nothing. Let me decide that. Well, on Sunday afternoon, the day father's gun went missing, there was a man who came to the house. He said he was from the Veterans Affairs Office, doing some kind of survey about wartime service records. He spoke with father in the study for maybe 20 minutes. Fairchild frowned. I'd forgotten about that. He had credentials, seemed legitimate. Asked me about my battalion, where we served, that sort of thing. Did he ask about Schoenfeld specifically? No. At least I don't think so. He had a list of locations, and Schoenfeld might have been on it, but he didn't single it out. What was his name? I don't remember. Something ordinary. Johnson? Thompson? He gave me a card, but I didn't keep it. Describe him. Middle-aged, average height, average build, brown hair, glasses, completely nondescript, the kind of man you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. And he was alone with you in your study? Yes, for those 20 minutes. Wolfe's eyes were fully open now, long enough to steal a gun if he knew where to look. But why would someone from Veterans Affairs? Fairchild stopped. You think he was a fake? I think it's remarkably convenient that a stranger appears in your study Sunday afternoon, and by Monday evening your gun is missing and being used to commit murder. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, add that to the list of things to investigate. Check with Veterans Affairs. Find out if they sent anyone to interview the colonel. Got it. Colonel, can you remember anything else about this man? Any distinguishing features, accent, mannerisms? Fairchild closed his eyes, concentrating. He had a slight limp, favored his left leg, and his right hand was scarred. Old burns, I think. The kind you see from engine fires or chemical exposure. Excellent. That's useful. Wolfe shifted in his chair. Now let's discuss your household staff. How long have they been with you? Mrs. Brennan has been our housekeeper for 12 years. Agnes Walsh has been our cook for 8. Patrick Corrigan, we hired 4 years ago. And you trust them? Completely. They're part of the family. Nevertheless, I'll need to speak with them. Archie will arrange it. Mrs. Fairchild's expression had gone cool. You suspect our servants? I suspect everyone, madam. That's how investigations work. Before she could respond, Fritz appeared in the doorway. Excuse me, Mr. Wolfe. Inspector Kramer is on the telephone. He says it's urgent. That was odd. Kramer wasn't supposed to call until after I met with him at 4. Wolfe picked up the phone on his desk. Yes? I couldn't hear Kramer's side of the conversation, but I watched Wolfe's face. His expression didn't change much. It rarely does, but his eyes narrowed slightly. I see, Wolfe said. Yes, they're here now. Very well. 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Fairchild. Inspector Kramer is coming here with a warrant for your arrest. He suggests you wait for him rather than forcing him to come to your home with uniformed officers. The room went very quiet. Mrs. Fairchild's hand flew to her mouth. Julia made a small sound of distress. The colonel just sat there, his face carved from stone. On what charge? He asked finally. Murder in the 1st degree. The district attorney has decided they have sufficient evidence to proceed. But we're investigating, and we'll continue to investigate. But Inspector Kramer has his job to do, and we can't interfere with it. Wolfe's tone was matter of fact. You'll need a lawyer, Colonel. Do you have one? Yes. Philip Rostov. His office is on Lexington Avenue. Archie. Telephone Mr. Rostov and explain the situation. Tell him to meet the colonel at the precinct. I was already reaching for my phone book. On it? Wolfe turned back to Fairchild. Colonel, I advise you to say nothing to the police beyond confirming what you've already told them. Don't elaborate. Don't speculate. Don't try to be helpful. Simply repeat your previous statement and wait for your lawyer. I have nothing to hide. Which is irrelevant. Innocent men have talked themselves into prison cells before. Don't be one of them. Catherine Fairchild was crying quietly now, and Julia had moved to put an arm around her mother. The colonel remained motionless, his military bearing refusing to crack. Mr. Wolfe, he said quietly, I'm trusting you to find the truth. I will find it, Colonel, whether it helps you or damns you. I will find it. It wasn't much comfort, but it was honest. Fairchild nodded, accepting it. We sat in uncomfortable silence while I called Rostov's office and explained the situation to his secretary. She said Rostov was in court, but would meet Fairchild at the precinct within the hour. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Inspector Lionel Kramer stood on the front step, looking tired and irritated. He was a big man, built like a boxer gone slightly soft, with a face that suggested he'd seen too much and been disappointed by most of it. Behind him were 2 uniformed officers. The dogs reacted immediately. Caesar was on his feet, Mars at his shoulder. Apollo had materialized from somewhere, and Diana was suddenly visible near the stairs. Minerva came down from the 2nd floor with her usual tactical precision, and Loyal moved to a position between Kramer and Wolfe's office. But they knew Kramer. They'd seen him enough times over the years that he didn't trigger the full threat response. Caesar's ears were forward, alert, but he wasn't growling. Mars held position but didn't advance. It was the difference between intruder and known adversary, still watchful, still ready but not actively hostile. Fritz opened the door. Inspector, please come in. Kramer's eyes swept over the dogs, then the bulletproof windows, then the hallway. Quite a fortress you've got here, Fritz. Mr. Wolfe values his privacy, sir. I bet he does. Kramer looked at me as I came to the hall. Goodwin, the colonel here? In the office. His lawyer's been notified. Good. Let's get this over with. I led him back to the office. The two uniformed officers stayed in the hall. No point crowding the room. Wolfe was still at his desk, the Fairchilds still in their chairs. Loyal had followed me back, and now stood near my desk, watching Kramer with those intelligent brown eyes. Kramer pulled out a folded document from his coat pocket. "Colonel Andrew Fairchild, I have a warrant for your arrest on the charge of murder in the first degree for the death of Marcus Henley. You have the right to remain silent." He went through the whole speech. Fairchild listened without expression, standing when Kramer indicated he should. Mrs. Fairchild was crying harder now, and Julia looked like she might be sick. "May I have a moment with my family?" Fairchild asked. Kramer nodded. "1 minute." Fairchild embraced his wife, then his daughter. I couldn't hear what he said to them, but whatever it was, it seemed to steady them both. Then he turned to Wolfe. "Find the truth, Mr. Wolfe, please." "I intend to." Kramer led Fairchild toward the door. As they passed, the colonel paused to look at Caesar, who was still watching from his position near the office entrance. "Beautiful animal," Fairchild said quietly. "You're lucky to have such loyal guardians." Then he was gone, Kramer and the uniformed officers escorting him down the hall and out the front door. Mrs. Fairchild collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Julia knelt beside her, holding her hand. Wolfe looked at them with an expression that might have been sympathy, though with him it was always hard to tell. "Madam," he said gently, "your husband is not convicted yet. We have time to work." "But they've arrested him. They think he's a murderer." "What they think is irrelevant. What I can prove is what matters." Wolfe rang for Fritz. "Fritz, please call a taxi for Mrs. Fairchild and her daughter." "Yes, sir." I helped get the two women ready to leave. Mrs. Fairchild had composed herself somewhat, and Julia was showing the same steel spine her father had. Good genes. At the door, Catherine Fairchild turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, please tell Mr. Wolfe, tell him we're counting on him. He knows, Mrs. Fairchild, and he doesn't like to lose." The taxi arrived, and they left. I closed the door and went back to the office. Wolfe was sitting with his eyes closed, his fingers interlaced across his middle mound. The dogs had relaxed slightly. Caesar had returned to his usual spot. Mars had gone upstairs, and the others had dispersed to their various patrol points. Only Loyal remained in the office, lying near the corner with his head on his paws, watching Wolfe. "Well," I said, "that was dramatic. You still want me to meet with Kramer at 4? "No. He's made his position clear. We're on our own now." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Call Saul. I want his report as soon as possible. Then start checking on this Veterans Affairs visitor. If he's a fake, which I'm certain he is, we need to know who he really was." "You think he stole the gun and killed Henley?" "I think someone went to considerable trouble to frame Colonel Fairchild. The question is why." Wolfe reached for his beer, found the bottle empty, and grimaced. "This case stinks of manipulation, Archie. Someone wanted Henley dead and Fairchild blamed. We need to find out who benefits from both outcomes. Could be Henley had other enemies. Could be someone else from the battalion who didn't want those wartime secrets coming out. Possible. Or it could be something else entirely." Wolfe pushed his lips in and out. "I dislike shooting in the dark. We need more information. Call Saul." I called Saul from my desk phone. He answered on the second ring. "Archie, I was just about to call you." "Perfect timing. What did you find?" "Quite a bit. Henley's apartment was sealed by the police, but I had a conversation with Mrs. Casper, the landlady. Very talkative woman. Also spoke with 2 other tenants who were home Monday night. And Mrs. Casper found the body Tuesday morning at 8:30. She has a pass key and goes in once a week to check on things. Henley traveled a lot for work, she said, and she liked to make sure the apartment was secure. When she opened the door, she found him on the floor, shot through the chest, dead for hours. Did she hear the gunshot Monday night? No, and neither did the other tenants I spoke with. The walls are thin, you can hear conversations through them. A gunshot should have been obvious. I sat up straighter, so either nobody was home to hear it, or the killer used a silencer, which is interesting because most criminals don't have access to those. But someone with military training might. Exactly what I thought. Saul paused. "There's more," Mrs. Casper said. "Henley had a visitor Monday night around 9:30. A man. She was coming in from the grocery store, and saw him going up the stairs. Did she get a good look? Not great. The lighting in the stairwell is poor. But she said he was medium height, wore a dark coat and hat, moved quickly, like he knew where he was going. That could be our colonel. Could be. Except for one thing. Mrs. Casper said the man had a pronounced limp, favored his left leg. The same limp as the fake Veterans Affairs investigator. Saul, you're a treasure. I know. There's one more thing. I managed to get a look at Henley's mailbox. It's in the entry hall, not locked. There were 2 letters that hadn't been collected. One was a bill. The other was from someone named Thomas Kellerman, postmarked from Boston 3 days ago. Kellerman, one of the guards who'd been present at Schoenfeld. Saul, can you get that letter? Already done. I'll bring it to you within the hour. You're my favorite person in New York. Tell that to Mr. Wolfe, and maybe he'll raise my rate. He hung up. I swiveled to face Wolfe and relayed everything Saul had said. Wolfe's eyes had opened fully now. A man with a limp visits Henley at 9:30 after Fairchild left, but within the window when Henley was killed. The same distinctive limp as the man who visited Fairchild's study Sunday afternoon. Has to be the same person. Almost certainly. And Kellerman, one of the surviving witnesses to the Schoenfeld incident, sent Henley a letter shortly before his death. This is not coincidence, Archie. You think Kellerman is involved. I think Kellerman has information someone didn't want shared. The question is whether he's a victim, an accomplice, or the killer himself. Wolfe leaned back. We need to speak with him immediately. Find him, get him here, or go to Boston if necessary. On it. I spent the next 20 minutes tracking down Thomas Kellerman. It wasn't hard. There was only one in the Boston area, and the phone directory gave me an address in Dorchester. I called, but there was no answer. I tried 3 more times over the next half hour. Still nothing. Saul arrived at 5:30 with Kellerman's letter. Fritz showed him into the office, and Saul handed me an envelope that had already been opened. Mrs. Casper was very accommodating, Saul said with a slight smile. I told her I was with the police investigation. Saul, you're terrible. I'm efficient. The letter was typed on plain paper, single-spaced, dated 4 days earlier. Marcus, I got your letter about the photographs. I don't know where you got them or what you think they prove, but I'm telling you the same thing I told you 10 years ago. Leave it alone. What happened at Schoenfeld is in the past. The army investigated. It was ruled justified. Bringing it up now won't change anything except to hurt people who don't deserve it. I served with Andrew Fairchild for 2 years. He was a good officer and a good man. If you're planning to use those photographs for blackmail or anything else, you're making a mistake. Don't contact me again. Tom Kellerman. I read it aloud for Wolfe's benefit. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. So Henley contacted Kellerman about the photographs. Wolfe said finally. Kellerman urged him to drop it. And shortly thereafter, Henley was murdered. You think Kellerman killed him to protect Fairchild? Or to protect himself? Or to protect the truth about what really happened at Schoenfeld? Wolfe's fingers drummed on his desk, a rare sign of agitation. We need to speak with Kellerman. Now. If you can't reach him by phone, drive to Boston tonight. It's a 4-hour drive. Then you'd better leave soon. I tried the number again. Still no answer. All right, I said. I'll take the sedan and head up there. You want me to bring him back? If he's willing. If not, at least get his statement about the Schoenfeld incident and anything else he knows about Henley's photographs. I stood up, already mentally planning the trip. Anything else? Yes. Take your gun. If Kellerman is the man with the limp, he's already killed once. He won't hesitate to kill again. That was cheerful. I went upstairs to pack an overnight bag, just in case, and to get my Marley 38 from the locked drawer in my bedroom. When I came back down, Fritz had prepared sandwiches and a thermos of coffee for the drive. Be careful, Archie, he said. Always am. That was a lie, but it made him feel better. I went out to the garage behind the brownstone where we kept the sedan, a 1953 Plymouth Cranbrook. Dark blue, reliable if not exciting. As I opened the car door, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Caesar and Loyal. The big Doberman and the brick-red pit bull stood there, watching me with their usual intensity. Caesar's tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, just an acknowledgement. Loyal's scarred ear was forward, his intelligent eyes focused on mine. "Can't take you boys this time," I said. "Need you here to watch the fort." Caesar made a sound low in his throat. Not a growl, just a rumble of understanding. Loyal sat down, still watching. I reached out and scratched Caesar behind the ears, then did the same for Loyal. "Keep Wolfe safe, all right? And if anyone tries to get in without permission, you know what to do." Caesar turned and padded back toward the brownstone. Loyal followed, but he looked back once before disappearing through the door Fritz had left open. Good dogs, the best. I climbed into the Plymouth, started the engine, and headed north toward Boston. It was going to be a long night. The drive to Boston was everything you'd expect from 4 hours on northeastern roads in October. Dark, cold, and punctuated by the occasional truck that thought it owned both lanes. I made good time anyway, stopping only once for gas in Hartford, and rolled into Dorchester a little before 10 o'clock. Thomas Kellerman's address was in a working-class neighborhood not far from the waterfront. Brick row houses, narrow streets, the kind of place where people worked with their hands and minded their own business. I found the right house easily enough. A 3-story walk-up with lights showing in the second-floor windows. I parked the Plymouth half a block down, took my gun from the glove compartment and slipped it into my coat pocket and walked back to Kellerman's building. The front door was unlocked, not unusual for this kind of place, where everyone knew everyone and strangers stood out. I climbed to the second floor and found apartment 2B. Light showed under the door and I could hear a radio playing inside, some quiz show, voices asking questions about state capitals. I knocked. The radio went silent immediately. Footsteps approached the door, hesitant. "Who is it?" A man's voice, rough-edged, cautious. "Mr. Kellerman, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe, the private investigator. I need to speak with you about Marcus Henley." Long silence. Then, "Henley's dead." "I know. That's why I'm here. Colonel Fairchild has been arrested for his murder. I need to ask you some questions." Another silence. Longer this time. "I don't want to get involved." "You already are involved, Mr. Kellerman. You sent Henley a letter 4 days before he was killed, telling him to drop whatever he was planning with those photographs. That makes you a material witness." "I don't know anything about his murder." "Then you have nothing to worry about. Just answer a few questions and I'll leave you alone." More silence. I could almost hear him thinking it through, weighing his options. Finally, the sound of a chain being removed, a lock turning. The door opened 6 inches. Thomas Kellerman was in his late 40s, medium height, solid build going soft around the middle. His face was lined and weary, with the kind of permanent squint that comes from years of factory work or other close vision labor. He wore a white undershirt and work pants, and his right hand gripped the door frame while his left stayed out of sight. The newspapers say a lot of things. Not all of them are true. Kellerman's jaw worked. Fairchild was a good officer. I served under him for 2 years, but if Henley was blackmailing him, he shrugged. People do stupid things when they're desperate. "Tell me about the photographs Henley had." "I never saw them." "But Henley told you about them." "He wrote to me about 6 months ago, said he'd found some pictures from the war, pictures that showed what really happened at Schoenfeld, said they were worth money if he could find the right buyer." "And what did you tell him?" "Same thing I told him in the letter you probably read. Leave it alone. The Schoenfeld incident was investigated and settled. Bringing it up again would just cause problems for everyone." "What really happened at Schoenfeld, Mr. Kellerman?" His expression closed down. "You want to know? Ask the army. They have the official report." "I'm asking you. You were there?" "Yeah, I was there." He set the gun down on the sofa beside him, but kept his hand near it. "We had 6 German prisoners in a farmhouse. 3 officers, 3 enlisted. Standard detention until they could be processed and sent to the POW camps. I was one of 4 guards. Lieutenant Hartwell was in charge. And one of the German officers, Captain Kessler, went crazy. Somehow got hold of a knife, probably lifted it from the farmhouse kitchen before we secured him. He attacked Corporal Danny Mitchell, killed him with 1 thrust to the throat. Then he went for Private Chen. The other 2 German officers used the chaos to make a run for it. And your guards shot them." "Damned right we did. They were escaping prisoners. and one of them had just killed our man. We fired. They went down. All 3 Germans died. It was self-defense and stopping an escape. The army agreed. But Henley claimed it was murder. Kellerman's face darkened. Henley claimed a lot of things. He was there, same as me, and he knew exactly what happened. But 6 months ago, he suddenly decides those dead Germans are worth cash money. Starts talking about photographs that prove Fairchild executed them in cold blood. Did the colonel execute them? No. Fairchild wasn't even there when it happened. He was at Battalion HQ, 2 miles away. He showed up 30 minutes after the shooting, examined the scene, took our statements, and filed the report. That's all. Then, how could Henley have photographs of Fairchild executing prisoners? He couldn't, unless they're fakes, which is what I figured. I leaned forward. Mr. Kellerman, someone killed Marcus Henley Monday night and set up Colonel Fairchild to take the fall. The killer used a gun stolen from Fairchild's study and made sure the evidence pointed straight at him. Do you have any idea who would do that? Kellerman was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. I don't know who killed Henley, but I'll tell you this. Whatever he was planning with those photographs, it wasn't just about money. Henley had a mean streak. Always did. He didn't like authority, didn't like officers, especially didn't like Fairchild. Why not? Because Fairchild wrote him up twice during the war for insubordination, and once for stealing rations from the company stores. Henley thought he was being singled out, but he wasn't. Fairchild just ran a tight unit and didn't tolerate troublemakers. So Henley had a grudge. Yeah, and grudges can last a long time. Kellerman picked up the gun again, not threatening, just restless. Look, Mr. Goodwin, I told you what I know. Henley had fake photographs and a vendetta. Somebody killed him for it. Could be Fairchild, could be someone else. I don't know, and I don't want to know. I've got a job and a life here, and I'm not getting dragged into whatever mess Henley made for himself. Fair enough, but I need to ask you one more thing. I pulled out my notebook. The man who visited Fairchild's study the day before Henley was killed, he claimed to be from Veterans Affairs, but we think he was fake. Medium height, average build, brown hair, glasses, had a limp in his left leg and burn scars on his right hand. Does that description match anyone you know from the battalion? Kellerman's face went very still. A limp and burn scars? Yes. Christ. He set the gun down again and rubbed his face with both hands. That sounds like David Chen, the private who was there when Kessler attacked. Yeah, Chen took a knife wound to the leg during the fight. Never healed right, left him with a permanent limp. And about a year after we got home, I heard he'd been in some kind of industrial accident, chemical plant explosion or something. Burned his hands pretty bad. My pulse picked up. Where is Chen now? Last I heard, he was in California. Los Angeles. Maybe, but that was years ago. I haven't kept in touch. Do you know his full name? David Chen. That's all I ever knew him as. He was quiet, kept to himself. Good soldier though, reliable. Was he friendly with Henley? Kellerman thought about it. Not particularly, but they were both enlisted, both in the same company. They would have known each other. I wrote it all down, then stood up. Thank you, Mr. Kellerman. You've been very helpful. Am I going to have to testify or something? Maybe. Depends on how this plays out. But for now, just don't leave town without letting us know. He walked me to the door. Mr. Goodwin, I meant what I said in that letter. Fairchild was a good officer. If he's innocent, I hope you can prove it. We're working on it. I went back down to the street and climbed into the Plymouth. It was nearly 11, and I had a 4-hour drive back to New York ahead of me. But now we had a name, David Chen, a man with a limp and burn scars who'd been present at Schoenfeld and might have reasons of his own for wanting Henley dead. I found a payphone at a gas station a few blocks away and called the brownstone. Fritz answered. It's Archie. Is he still up? Yes, Mr. Archie, in the office. I'll transfer you. A click, then Wolfe's voice. Yes? I found Kellerman. He's alive, cooperative, and confirms the basic story about Schoenfeld. But here's the interesting part. The man with the limp and the burn scars sounds like David Chen, another soldier who was there when the German officers were killed. Chen had a knife wound that left him with a permanent limp and he was in some kind of chemical accident years later that scarred his hands. Silence while Wolfe processed that. Where is Chen now? Kellerman thinks California, but he's not sure. Lost touch years ago. Find him. Start with military records, veterans organizations, anything that might give us a current location. It's going to take time. Then start immediately. This case is moving faster than I'd like, and Colonel Fairchild doesn't have the luxury of waiting. I'm heading back now. Should be there by 3 or 4 in the morning. Drive carefully. We need you intact. He hung up. I got back in the Plymouth and pointed it south toward New York. The roads were emptier now, just me and the trucks and the darkness. I thought about David Chen, a quiet, reliable soldier who'd been there when 3 German officers died, who'd been wounded in the same fight, who might have photographs that could destroy a colonel's reputation, or who might be trying to protect that reputation by framing someone else for murder. Either way, we needed to find him. I pushed the Plymouth up to 60 and kept driving. I got back to the brownstone a little after 3 in the morning. The street was quiet, the kind of dead silence you only get in Manhattan in the deepest hours when even the city that never sleeps takes a breath. The lights were on in the office. I could see them through the bulletproof windows. Wolfe was still up, which wasn't entirely surprising. When a case had his attention, he'd sometimes work through the night, reading, thinking, drinking beer, and waiting for the pieces to fall into place. I let myself in quietly. The hallway was dark, except for the light spilling from the office, and I'd taken maybe 3 steps when I heard the soft click of claws on the hardwood floor. Caesar materialized from the shadows near the stairs, Mars right behind him. They'd heard the car, heard my key in the lock, and come to investigate. Caesar's dark eyes caught the light as he studied me, confirming I was who I was supposed to be. Then his tail moved once, acknowledgement, and he padded back toward the office. Mars lingered a moment longer, then followed. I hung up my coat and went to the office. Wolfe was at his desk with a book, something about the cultivation of mushrooms in controlled environments. 2 empty beer bottles sat on the tray beside him, and a third was half finished. He looked up as I entered. "You made good time." I drove fast. I dropped into my chair and stretched. "The Plymouth handles better than it looks. Your conversation with Mr. Kellerman was productive?" "Very." He confirmed the Schoenfeld story. The German officer attacked, killed 1 guard, wounded another. 2 other Germans tried to escape. The guards shot all 3. Kellerman swears Fairchild wasn't there when it happened, showed up after the fact to document everything. Which means Henley's photographs, if they show Fairchild executing prisoners, must be fabrications. That's what Kellerman thinks. He also confirmed that Henley had a grudge against Fairchild going back to the war. Fairchild wrote him up multiple times for disciplinary issues. Wolfe nodded slowly. A grudge is a powerful motive, but it doesn't explain why someone would kill Henley and frame Fairchild for it. Unless the killer wanted both outcomes, Henley dead and Fairchild destroyed. Possible. What else did Kellerman tell you? I filled him in on David Chen, the limp, the burn scars, the quiet demeanor, the last known location somewhere in California. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. So Chen was present at Schoenfeld, was wounded in the same incident, and matches the description of the man who visited Fairchild's study and likely visited Henley's apartment the night of the murder. That's the theory. Then we need to find him immediately. Wolfe reached for his beer and drank. In the morning, contact the Veterans Administration, see if they have a current address for David Chen. Also check with the Los Angeles police if he's in California as Kellerman suggested. They may have records. You think Chen killed Henley? I think Chen is intimately connected to this case in ways we don't yet understand. Whether he's the killer, an accomplice, or merely a witness remains to be seen. Wolfe set down his glass. Get some sleep, Archie. We'll resume this at a civilized hour. I didn't argue. I was exhausted, and my bed upstairs sounded better than anything else in the world. I trudged up to the 2nd floor. As I reached my room, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned to find Loyal standing in the hallway, his brick-red coat almost invisible in the dim light. Only his white chest blaze and intelligent eyes visible. "Hey, boy," I said quietly, "what are you doing up here?" He padded closer and sat down, looking up at me with that expression he got sometimes. The one that reminded you he'd walked 200 miles to find justice for his murdered master. I reached down and scratched behind his notched ear. You keeping watch? His tail moved slightly. Good dog, but I'm fine. Go back to your post. He stood, turned, and trotted back toward the stairs. I watched him go, then went into my room and collapsed onto the bed without bothering to undress properly. I was asleep in seconds. I woke at 9:30 to the smell of coffee and bacon. Fritz's cooking could raise the dead, and it certainly worked on the exhausted. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs. Wolfe was already in the office. He'd come down from his morning orchid session at 11, as always, and was reading the morning newspapers. 3 of them were spread across his desk: the Times, the Herald Tribune, and the Daily News. Coffee's in the kitchen, he said without looking up. Fritz is making shirred eggs. I detoured to the kitchen, where Fritz had indeed prepared a breakfast that belonged in a restaurant instead of a private home. Shirred eggs with cream and chives, crisp bacon, fresh rolls, orange juice and coffee that could wake a coma patient. Fritz, you're a saint. Eat, Mr. Archie. You had a long night. I ate at the kitchen table while the dogs made their morning rounds. Caesar checked the front windows, Mars patrolled upstairs, Apollo investigated the back door, Minerva examined the basement stairs, and Diana did a full circuit of the ground floor. Loyal as usual, divided his time between watching the front door and checking on Wolfe in the office. It was a routine they'd developed over time, a systematic security sweep that happened multiple times a day. Nobody had trained them to do it this way. They'd just organized themselves according to their strengths and temperaments. Caesar led, Mars enforced, Apollo scouted, Minerva strategized, Diana moved fast, and Loyal held the center. After breakfast, I went to the office with fresh coffee. Wolfe had finished the papers and was scowling. The Times has a front-page story about Fairchild's arrest, he said. They're treating it as a tragic fall from grace. War hero turned murderer. Very dramatic, very damaging. Any mention of the blackmail? Only that sources close to the investigation suggest a financial dispute. No details about the photographs or the Schoenfeld incident. Wolfe pushed the paper away. The district attorney is being careful. They don't want the specifics public until the trial, which gives us time to work. Very little time. The arraignment is tomorrow. If the judge denies bail, which is likely in a murder case, Fairchild will remain in custody until trial. Wolfe leaned back. We need to accelerate our investigation. What's your plan for finding David Chen? Start with the VA, like you said. Then try Los Angeles police records, veterans organizations, anything that might give us a current address. Do it now, and call Saul. I want him to visit the other members of Fairchild's household. The housekeeper, the cook, the driver. Someone may have noticed something unusual in the days before the gun disappeared. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone. The Veterans Administration was predictably bureaucratic. They had records on David Chen but couldn't release his current address without proper authorization, which would take days to obtain through official channels. I tried a different approach. I called Lon Cohen, a reporter at the Gazette, who owed us favors and had access to information most people couldn't get. Lon, it's Archie Goodwin. Archie, I was just reading about your client getting arrested for murder. Must be keeping you busy. You could say that. I need a favor. Of course you do. What is it? I need to find a guy named David Chen. He's a veteran, probably in his late 40s. Last known location was California. I need a current address. That's not much to go on. He has a distinctive limp and burn scars on his right hand. Served in the 44th Infantry Regiment during the war. Now that's better. Give me an hour. He hung up. I loved Lon. No questions, no hesitation, just results. While I waited, I called Saul and gave him the assignment to interview Fairchild's household staff. He said he'd handle it immediately and report back by evening. Then I sat back and thought about the case. We had a murder victim, Marcus Henley, blackmailer and grudge holder. We had a suspect, Colonel Andrew Fairchild, war hero with motive and opportunity. We had a missing gun, stolen from Fairchild's study by someone with access. We had mysterious photographs, supposedly showing Fairchild executing prisoners, but almost certainly fake. We had a mysterious visitor, David Chen, possibly with a limp and burn scars, who'd visited Fairchild's study the day before the murder, and possibly Henley's apartment the night he died. And we had an old incident in Germany. 3 German officers killed in what was ruled self-defense, but which Henley claimed was murder. The pieces were there. We just needed to figure out how they fit together. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie, it's Lon. I found your guy. That was fast, even for Lon. Where? David Chen, age 48, lives in Manhattan, has for the past 3 years, works as a night watchman at a warehouse in the meatpacking district. I sat up straight. He's here, in New York. Yeah, and get this, he rents a room in a boarding house on West 47th Street. That's only a few blocks from where Henley lived.
Lon, I could kiss you.
I'd prefer you owe me a story when this is over. Deal. He gave me the address, both the boarding house and the warehouse where Chen worked. I wrote them down, thanked him again, and hung up. Wolfe was watching me. Mr. Chen is in New York? Has been for 3 years. Works nights, lives a few blocks from Henley's apartment. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. That is not a coincidence. No, it's not. Visit him, today. Find out what he knows, and why he's in New York. And Archie, I know. Be careful. If he killed Henley, he won't hesitate to kill again. I checked my watch. It was almost noon. Chen worked nights, which meant he was probably sleeping now. I could go to his boarding house and try to catch him there, or I could wait until evening and visit him at the warehouse. The boarding house seemed smarter. Catch him off guard, in a place where he might be less defensive. I went upstairs, got my gun again, the Marley 38, and slipped it into my shoulder holster. Then I came back down, told Fritz where I was going, and headed out. Caesar and Loyal were both at the front door when I left. They watched me go with that same intensity they always had, and I found myself grateful for it. When you're going to confront a possible murderer, it's nice to know someone's watching your back, even if they're stuck at home. I took a taxi to West 47th Street. The boarding house was exactly what you'd expect, a narrow brownstone that had been subdivided into a dozen small rooms, paint peeling, steps sagging, the kind of place where people stayed when they couldn't afford better or didn't want to be found. I rang the bell. A woman answered, 60-something, grey hair pulled back, wearing a house dress and slippers. Help you? I'm looking for David Chen. I understand he rents a room here. Mr. Chen's in 3C, but he works nights, so he's sleeping. Come back this evening. It's urgent. I only need a few minutes. She looked skeptical. You a bill collector? No, ma'am. I'm a private investigator working on a case that involves him. I just need to ask a few questions.
He in trouble?
I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to find out. She chewed that over, then shrugged. 3rd floor, door on the right. If he throws something at you, it's not my problem. Fair enough. I climbed the stairs, narrow, creaking, smelling of old cooking and mildew. The 3rd floor had 2 doors. I knocked on the one on the right. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Mr. Chen? My name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. I need to speak with you about Marcus Henley. Silence. Then from inside. Go away. Can't do that, Mr. Chen. We need to talk. I don't know any Marcus Henley. That's interesting, because you were in his battalion during the war. You were there at Schoenfeld when 3 German officers were killed, and I think you visited his apartment the night he was murdered. Longer silence this time, then the sound of a lock turning. The door opened 6 inches. A chain held it from opening further. The man behind it was exactly as described, medium height, Chinese features, somewhere in his late 40s. His hair was thinning, his face lined with exhaustion and something else. Worry, maybe, or fear. And when he gripped the edge of the door, I could see the scars on his right hand. Old burn marks, shiny and puckered. I didn't kill Henley, he said. Then invite me in and tell me who did. He stared at me for a long moment, then closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again. I went inside. The room was tiny. A bed, a dresser, a single chair, a hot plate on a small table. One window looked out onto an air shaft. Everything was meticulously clean and organized, military style. The bed was made with hospital corners. The few clothes visible were hung neatly. A single photograph sat on the dresser. 5 soldiers in uniform, squinting into the sun somewhere in Europe. Chen closed the door and gestured to the chair. "Sit." I sat. He remained standing, his back to the wall, his scarred hand flexing unconsciously. "How did you find me?" he asked. "We're good at finding people. Mr. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. Colonel Andrew Fairchild has been arrested for murdering Marcus Henley. The evidence points to him, motive, opportunity, and a gun stolen from his study. But we think someone set him up, and all the evidence suggests that someone is you." His face went pale. "I didn't set him up. I was trying to protect him." "Then start talking. Tell me everything." Chen moved to the bed and sat down heavily. He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "I've lived in New York for 3 years," he said finally. "I moved here from California because I needed to be where I could keep an eye on things. On Henley specifically." "Why?" "Because I knew he was dangerous. I knew he had those photographs, and I knew he'd eventually try to use them." "What photographs, Mr. Chen? What do they actually show?" Chen's scarred hand clenched into a fist. "They show the aftermath at Schoenfeld, the 3 dead German officers, but they've been altered, doctored to make it look like Colonel Fairchild was there during the shooting, like he was the one who gave the order or pulled the trigger himself. But he wasn't there. No, he wasn't. He arrived after, like Kellerman told you, but Henley had access to photographs from the investigation, the crime scene photos, the documentation photos, and somehow, over the years, he altered them, added the colonel to scenes where he wasn't, made it look like murder instead of self-defense." "How do you know this?" "Because Henley showed them to me. 6 months ago, he found out I was in New York. He came to see me, said he was going to use the photographs to blackmail Fairchild, wanted me to back up his story, say I witnessed the executions." "And you refused?" "Of course I refused. It was a lie. The colonel didn't murder anyone." Chen stood up, agitated. "Henley didn't care. He said the photographs would be enough, that newspapers wouldn't investigate too closely, that Fairchild's reputation would be destroyed whether the story was true or not." "So what did you do?" Chen's expression was miserable. "I tried to stop him. I told him I'd go to the police, tell them the truth. He laughed, said it was my word against his, and the photographs would speak louder than words." "You could have gone to Fairchild." "I thought about it, but I was ashamed. The colonel was a good officer, a good man, and I was working as a night watchman, living in a boarding house, barely getting by. I didn't want him to see what I'd become. I understood that the pride that makes people suffer in silence, rather than ask for help from someone they respect." "So instead you started watching Henley?" "Yes, I followed him sometimes, tried to figure out his plans. I knew he'd eventually make his move. I wanted to be ready to counter it somehow." "Did you visit Colonel Fairchild's study? Pretend to be from Veterans Affairs?" Chen looked away. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted to warn him. Face to face. Tell him what Henley was planning. But when I got there, I couldn't do it. I sat in his study, made small talk about the war, and the whole time I was thinking, tell him, warn him, but I couldn't get the words out. And while you were there, you saw his guns." "Yes, in a display case, including a Colt .45 automatic." Chen's voice dropped. "I didn't take it, Mr. Goodwin. I swear I didn't." "But you knew where it was." "Yes. And later, when Henley was killed with that same caliber weapon, you realized what had happened." Chen nodded miserably. "Someone else took the gun. Someone who knew about the blackmail, knew about Fairchild's weapons, and decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Eliminate Henley and frame Fairchild for it." "Who?" "I don't know. Mr. Chen, you're holding something back. I can see it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The night Henley was killed, I was there. My hand moved instinctively toward my gun, at his apartment. Outside, watching. I'd followed him home from a bar he frequented. I don't know what I wanted. Maybe to confront him one last time, tell him to stop." Chen's face was anguished. "I was standing across the street when I saw someone go into his building. A man, medium height, dark coat, moving quickly." "What time?" 9:30, maybe 9:40. "Did you see his face?" "No, He kept his head down, and the lighting was poor. But you saw him go in? Yes. And 15 minutes later, I saw him leave. Same quick movements, same dark coat. That's when I heard what sounded like a door slamming, except it wasn't a door. It was a gunshot, muffled somehow. A silencer. I think so. Chen's voice shook. I waited a few minutes, then I went up to Henley's apartment. I knocked. No answer. I tried the door, it was unlocked. I went in and found him on the floor, dead, shot through the chest. And you left without calling the police? Yes. Why? Because I was terrified. I'd been watching Henley, following him, visiting Fairchild's house under false pretenses. If the police found me there, I'd be a suspect. So I ran. I studied him. He was either telling the truth, or he was the best actor I'd ever seen. Mr. Chen, you realize how this sounds. You were there when Henley was killed. You had motive. He was trying to blackmail your former commanding officer. You had opportunity. You were right there, and your story about seeing another man go in is convenient. I know how it sounds, but I'm telling you the truth. Chen met my eyes. Mr. Goodwin, I didn't kill Marcus Henley, but I know who did. Who? I don't know his name, but I know what he is. Chen's scarred hand trembled. He's someone who wanted Henley dead and Fairchild destroyed. Someone who knew about the blackmail, knew about the guns, and was willing to commit murder to achieve both goals. And I think he might have been working with Henley. What makes you say that? Because the man I saw that night, the one going into Henley's building, he moved like he knew exactly where he was going, like he'd been there before, like he was expected. That was interesting. So Henley let him in? I think so, which means Henley trusted him, or at least wasn't afraid of him, until he shot him. Yes. I pulled out my notebook. Describe this man. Everything you can remember. Chen closed his eyes, concentrating. Medium height, maybe 5'10". Medium build, dark coat, looked expensive, not cheap, dark hat pulled low. He walked with purpose, but not urgency. And, Chen opened his eyes. He had a briefcase, leather, slim, professional looking. Like a businessman or lawyer. Yes, exactly like that. I wrote it all down. Anything else? Any distinguishing features? Not that I could see. It was dark, and I was across the street. Did you notice if he had a limp? Chen frowned. A limp? No, he walked normally. That threw me. If the man Chen saw wasn't limping, then it wasn't Chen himself, which either meant Chen was telling the truth, or he was smart enough to invent a detail that exonerated him. Mr. Chen, I need you to come with me. Mr. Wolfe needs to hear all this directly. I can't. I have to sleep. I work tonight. Call in sick. This is more important. Chen hesitated, then nodded. All right. But I want your word. I'm not a suspect. I'm a witness. That depends on whether Mr. Wolfe believes you. He'll believe me, because I'm telling the truth. I hoped he was right. We took a taxi back to the brownstone. Chen sat in silence the whole way, his scarred hand gripping his knee, staring out the window at the city passing by. I watched him peripherally, trying to read him. He seemed genuinely frightened, genuinely regretful. But I've been fooled before. When we arrived at 918 West 35th Street, Chen looked up at the building with an expression I couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe, or nervousness. I've heard about this place, he said quietly. During the war, some of the guys used to talk about Nero Wolfe, said he was the smartest detective in the world. He'd agree with that assessment. I led him up the steps. Fritz opened the door before I could use my key. He'd seen us coming through the one-way glass. Mr. Archie, and a guest. This is David Chen. Mr. Wolfe's expecting him. Fritz's eyes flicked to Chen, taking in the details with his usual precision. Then he stepped aside. Please come in. As we entered the hallway, the dogs appeared. All 6 of them, simultaneously, as if they'd been waiting. Caesar from the office, Mars from the stairs, Apollo from the front room, Minerva from somewhere above, Diana from the kitchen, and Loyal from his usual spot near the coat rack. Chen stopped dead, his eyes widening. Don't worry, I said. They're friendly, mostly. That wasn't entirely reassuring, but it was accurate. The dogs weren't aggressive yet. They were assessing. Caesar's ears were forward, his dark eyes fixed on Chen with complete attention. Mars stood at Caesar's flank, ready to enforce whatever decision the Alpha made. Apollo circled slightly to the side, checking angles. Minerva had positioned herself between Chen and the stairs. Diana hovered near the office door, and Loyal just watched with those intelligent brown eyes, measuring, remembering. "They're beautiful," Chen said softly, disciplined. "They know their jobs." I moved toward the office. "Come on, Mr. Wolfe doesn't like to be kept waiting." The dogs parted to let us through, but they didn't disperse. They followed us to the office, taking up new positions that created a loose perimeter around Chen. Not threatening, just... Wolfe was at his desk with a book about truffle cultivation. He set it aside as we entered and studied Chen with half-closed eyes. "Mr. Chen, please sit." Chen took the red leather chair. I went to my desk, notebook ready. The dogs settled into various positions, Caesar near Wolfe's desk, Mars by the door, Apollo at the window, Minerva in the archway, Diana near my desk, and Loyal in his corner spot where he could see everything. Wolfe rang for Fritz. "Beer, please." "Mr. Chen, will you have anything?" "No, thank you." Fritz brought 2 bottles of Remmers on a tray. Wolfe opened one and poured it with his usual care. "Mr. Goodwin tells me you have information about Marcus Henley's murder," Wolfe said. "Yes, sir." "Then please, explain everything from the beginning. Leave nothing out." Chen did. He told the same story he'd told me, but with more detail about Henley contacting him 6 months ago, about the doctored photographs, about the refusal to participate in the blackmail scheme. He described following Henley, watching his movements, trying to find some way to stop him without directly confronting either Henley or Colonel Fairchild. "Why not simply go to the Colonel and tell him the truth?" Wolfe asked. Chen's face tightened. "Pride, Mr. Wolfe. Stupid, pointless pride. The Colonel remembered me as a competent soldier. I didn't want him to see what I'd become. A night watchman living in a boarding house, barely making ends meet. I wanted to handle it myself. And instead you accomplished nothing, except making yourself look suspicious." "Yes, sir." Wolfe drank beer. "Tell me about the night Henley was killed. Everything you saw." Chen repeated what he'd told me, watching from across the street, seeing the man in the dark coat enter the building at 9:30 or 9:40, hearing the muffled gunshot 15 minutes later, going up to find Henley's body. "And you're certain this man had no limp?" Wolfe asked. "Certain. He walked normally, quickly, purposefully, but normally." Wolfe's eyes opened slightly. "That's interesting. You visited Colonel Fairchild's study under false pretenses the day before the murder. You have a distinctive limp from your war wound. Yet the man you saw had no such impediment. I know how it looks, Mr. Wolfe, but I'm telling the truth. I didn't kill Henley." "Perhaps not, but you visited his apartment that night. Your fingerprints would be on the door, possibly inside the apartment. When the police eventually connect you to this case, and they will, you'll be arrested as an accomplice at minimum." Chen's face went pale. "I didn't think." "No, you didn't. You reacted emotionally, instead of rationally. You ran instead of reporting the crime. You've made yourself a suspect in a capital murder case." Wolfe paused. "However, your story has the ring of truth. Mr. Goodwin, what's your assessment?" I'd been watching Chen throughout his recitation, looking for tells, inconsistencies, anything that suggested deception. I hadn't found any. "I believe him," I said. "He's either telling the truth, or he's better than any actor on Broadway." Wolfe nodded slowly. "I concur. Which means we have a new problem. If Mr. Chen didn't kill Henley, and Colonel Fairchild didn't kill Henley, then who did?" "Someone who wanted both Henley dead and Fairchild framed," I said. "Someone who knew about the blackmail, had access to Fairchild's study, and was familiar enough with Henley that Henley would let him into his apartment at night." "Precisely." Wolfe turned back to Chen. "These photographs Henley claimed to have, the doctored images from Schoenfeld, did you ever see them clearly?" "Only briefly. Henley showed me 3 or 4 when he was trying to get me to support his story. They looked real at first glance, genuine combat photography from the period. But when I looked closer, I could tell they'd been altered. The lighting was wrong on some of the figures. The shadows didn't match, and the Colonel's face, it looked like it had been inserted from a different photograph." "Do you know where Henley kept these photographs?" In his apartment somewhere. He said they were his insurance policy. Wolfe's fingers drummed on his desk. The police would have found them when they searched the apartment after the murder, yet there's been no mention of them in the newspapers or in anything Inspector Kramer has said. Why? I saw where he was going. Because they're gone. The killer took them. Exactly. The killer murdered Henley and removed the photographs, which suggests the photographs themselves were the real target, not just Henley. But why frame Fairchild then? I asked. If the goal was just to get the photographs, kill Henley and make it look like a robbery or a random crime, because the killer wanted to destroy Fairchild's reputation as well, wanted him arrested, tried, publicly humiliated. Wolfe's eyes were fully open now. This isn't just murder, Archie. It's revenge. Someone hates the Colonel enough to orchestrate an elaborate frame and hates him enough to ensure his complete destruction. Chen leaned forward. Who would hate him that much? That's what we need to discover. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, we need a complete list of everyone who might have a grudge against Colonel Fairchild. Start with the people who had access to his study, the household staff, family members, close associates. Cross-reference against anyone who might have known about Henley's blackmail scheme. I'll get Harrison Pembroke on the phone. He can provide names. Do so. Also contact Saul. I want his report on the household staff interviews immediately. The phone rang before I could pick it up. Fritz's voice came through on the intercom. Mr. Wolfe, Inspector Kramer is here. He says it's urgent. Wolfe and I exchanged glances. Kramer showing up unannounced was never good news. Show him in, Wolfe said. Then to Chen, Mr. Chen, I suggest you remain silent unless directly questioned. Let me handle Inspector Kramer. Chen nodded, looking nervous. Kramer entered a moment later, his expression somewhere between irritated and grimly satisfied. He stopped when he saw Chen, his eyes narrowing. Who's this? David Chen, Wolfe said calmly. He served under Colonel Fairchild during the war. He has information relevant to the case. Does he now? Kramer pulled out a cigar, bit off the end, and lit it. The dogs didn't react to Kramer's presence anymore. They'd seen him too many times, but Caesar did shift position slightly, moving between Kramer and Chen. Protective, but not aggressive. Inspector, to what do we owe this visit? Wolfe asked. I thought you'd want to know. Colonel Fairchild made bail this morning. Judge set it at $50,000. His brother-in-law posted it within an hour. That was good news. At least Fairchild would be home with his family instead of sitting in a cell. I'm glad to hear it, Wolfe said. Is that all? Not quite. Kramer's eyes moved to Chen again. I'm here because we found something interesting in Henley's apartment. Took us a few days to process the scene thoroughly, but we finally got into his locked desk drawer. And we found correspondence. Letters between Henley and several people from his old battalion, including one from Mr. Chen here, sent 2 months ago. Chen's face went white. What did the letter say? Wolfe asked. Kramer pulled out a folded paper from his coat pocket and read, Marcus, I'm asking you one last time to drop this scheme of yours. The photographs are lies, and using them will destroy an innocent man. If you go through with this blackmail, I'll have no choice but to go to the authorities. Think about what you're doing. David Chen. He looked up at Chen. So you knew about the blackmail, you knew about the photographs, and you threatened Henley just weeks before he was murdered. Want to explain that, Mr. Chen? Chen looked at me desperately. I gave him a slight nod. Tell the truth, but carefully. I did write that letter, Chen said quietly. I was trying to stop him from destroying Colonel Fairchild's reputation with fake evidence. Fake evidence? You mean these photographs? Yes. They were doctored images from an incident in Germany. They made it look like the Colonel had executed prisoners when he hadn't. And you know this how? Because I was there, at Schoenfeld, when the German officers died. It was self-defense, not murder. The army investigated and ruled it justified. But Henley had altered photographs to make it look like something else. Kramer chewed his cigar. Convenient story. Problem is, we didn't find any photographs in Henley's apartment. Not one. The killer took them, Wolfe said. Or they never existed. Kramer pointed his cigar at Chen. Mr. Chen, where were you Monday night between 9 and 10:30? Chen hesitated. I could see him weighing his options. Lie and be caught later, or tell the truth and be arrested now. He chose truth. I was outside Henley's building, watching. Watching what? Watching to see if anyone visited him. I'd been following him periodically, trying to figure out his plans. So you admit you were stalking him? I was trying to protect Colonel Fairchild. By being conveniently present when Henley was murdered. Kramer's voice had gone cold. Mr. Chen, I'm placing you under arrest as a material witness in the murder of Marcus Henley. You have the right to remain silent. Inspector, Wolfe interrupted. Mr. Chen has been cooperating fully with our investigation. Arresting him will only impede our ability to find the real killer. Your investigation isn't my concern, Wolfe. My concern is solving a murder. And right now, I've got two suspects, Colonel Fairchild and Mr. Chen here. Maybe they worked together. Maybe they didn't. Either way, Chen's coming with me. Inspector, you're making a mistake. I've made mistakes before. I'll make them again. But taking this guy in for questioning isn't one of them. Kramer gestured to Chen. Stand up, please. Chen stood slowly. His scarred hand was shaking. I didn't kill him, he said quietly. I swear I didn't. Then you'll have plenty of time to prove it. Kramer produced handcuffs. Turn around. Before Chen could comply, Wolfe spoke again. Inspector, before you take Mr. Chen, perhaps you'd like to hear what else we've discovered. It might save you from arresting an innocent man. Kramer paused. I'm listening, but make it quick. The man who visited Colonel Fairchild's study the day before the murder, the one posing as a Veterans Affairs investigator, that was Mr. Chen. He admits it freely. He has a distinctive limp from a war wound and burn scars on his right hand, both highly visible, highly memorable. So the man Mr. Chen saw entering Henley's building Monday night, the man who was there at the time of the murder, had no limp, walked normally, purposefully. If Mr. Chen were the killer, he would have had to fake his own disability, which is absurd, or he would have had to be in two places at once. Kramer's eyes narrowed. He could be lying about seeing someone else. He could be. But consider this. Why would Mr. Chen come here voluntarily to give us information if he were guilty? Why would he admit to being at the crime scene? Why would he confess to writing threatening letters to the victim? These are not the actions of a guilty man trying to avoid detection. These are the actions of someone desperate to clear an innocent man's name, or the actions of someone trying to muddy the waters with false testimony. Perhaps, but arresting him now accomplishes nothing except removing a valuable source of information from our investigation. I suggest instead that you release him to my custody. Let him continue cooperating with us. If we determine he's guilty, I'll deliver him to you personally. Kramer chewed his cigar, thinking. The room was silent except for the faint sound of Caesar's breathing and the ticking of the clock on Wolfe's shelf. No, Kramer said finally. He's coming with me. But I'll tell you what, I won't charge him yet. I'll hold him as a material witness for 48 hours. If you can prove he's innocent in that time, fine. If not, he gets charged with murder. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than an immediate arrest. Wolfe nodded. Acceptable. Chen looked between us, his expression a mixture of fear and relief. Kramer cuffed him, hands in front at least, and led him toward the door. At the threshold, Chen turned back. Mr. Wolfe, find the truth, please. The Colonel doesn't deserve this. I will find it, Mr. Chen. That I promise. Then Kramer and Chen were gone, the front door closing behind them with a solid thunk. I looked at Wolfe. 48 hours. That's not much time. No, it isn't. Wolfe reached for his beer, found the bottle empty, and grimaced. We need to accelerate everything. Call Saul immediately. I want his report now, not later. Also contact Harrison Pembroke. I need that complete list of household members and associates who had access to Fairchild's study. And I want to see the Colonel himself here. This evening, if possible. You think he's holding something back? I think everyone is holding something back. People always do. They hide things out of shame, fear, misplaced loyalty. Our job is to uncover what's being hidden and determine what's relevant. I started making calls. Saul first, he answered immediately. Archie, I was just about to call you. I finished interviewing Fairchild's household staff. And? 3 people total, like you said. Mrs. Dorothy Brennan, the housekeeper, been with them 12 years, absolutely devoted to the family. Agnes Walsh, the cook, 8 years, similar devotion. And Patrick Corrigan, the driver, 4 years, solid reputation. Did any of them notice anything unusual in the days before the gun disappeared? Mrs. Brennan did. She said there was a visitor Sunday afternoon, a man claiming to be from Veterans Affairs. She let him in, showed him to the study where the colonel was working. He stayed about 20 minutes, then left. She described him as average height, brown hair, glasses, ordinary looking. That's Chen. We know about him. Anything else? Yes. Corrigan, the driver, said he noticed someone watching the house on Saturday evening. A man standing across the street, just watching. Corrigan went out to ask if he needed help, but the man walked away before he could reach him. Description? Tall, well-dressed, dark coat. Corrigan couldn't see his face. The street lighting isn't great there. Could it have been Chen? Corrigan said. The man was tall, Chen's medium height, right? Right, so someone else was watching the house. I felt a tingle of excitement. Saul, anything else? One more thing. Julia Fairchild, the daughter. Apparently she has a boyfriend. The family doesn't approve of. Mrs. Brennan mentioned it in passing, said the colonel, and Mrs. Fairchild have been arguing with Julia about him lately. Who's the boyfriend? She didn't know his name, just that he's older than Julia, works in some kind of business, and the family thinks he's not suitable. Find out who he is. Names, background, everything. Already on it. I'll have something by tonight. I hung up and relayed everything to Wolfe. His expression darkened. A boyfriend the family disapproves of, and someone watching the house the day before the gun disappeared. Wolfe's fingers drummed again. Archie, we need to speak with Julia Fairchild. Alone, without her parents present. You think the boyfriend's involved? I think we need to know who he is, and whether he had access to the colonel's study. I called the Fairchild residence. Mrs. Brennan answered. This is Archie Goodwin calling for Miss Julia Fairchild. One moment, please. Julia came on the line a minute later. Mr. Goodwin? Miss Fairchild. Mr. Wolfe would like to speak with you this afternoon. Here at his office. Would 3 o'clock be convenient? Is this about my father? Yes. We have some questions about the household, about people who might have had access to your home. It would be very helpful if you could come. All right. 3 o'clock. One more thing. Mr. Wolfe would prefer to speak with you alone. Your parents don't need to accompany you. There was a pause. Why alone? Because sometimes it's easier to speak freely without family present. You're not in any trouble, Miss Fairchild. We just need information. Okay, I'll take a taxi. She hung up. I looked at Wolfe. She'll be here at 3.
Good. Now call Harrison Pembroke. I need that list of associates.
I spent the next hour on the phone with Pembroke, getting names, backgrounds, relationships. By the time I finished, I had a list of 17 people who'd had access to the Fairchild study in the past month. Family members, business associates, political colleagues, old war buddies. 17 suspects, or 17 potential witnesses. Hard to say which. At 2:30, Fritz brought lunch to the office. Cold roast beef sandwiches, potato salad, fresh rolls. I ate at my desk while Wolfe consumed his portion with his usual methodical precision. At 3 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. Julia Fairchild stood on the step, looking young and nervous. She wore a simple grey dress, carried a small purse, and had clearly been crying recently. Her eyes were red, her makeup slightly smudged. Fritz showed her in. The dogs did their usual assessment. Caesar studying, Mars flanking, Apollo circling, Minerva positioning, Diana watching, Loyal measuring. But they seemed to sense her distress. Caesar's tail moved slightly. Not a wag, just an acknowledgement of her emotional state. Loyal even took a step closer, as if offering silent comfort. They won't hurt you, I said gently. I know. They're beautiful. She reached out tentatively and touched Caesar's head. The big Doberman allowed it, his dark eyes watching her with what might have been sympathy. I led her to the office. Wolfe greeted her with more warmth than he usually showed. She was young, distressed, and deserving of courtesy. Miss Fairchild, thank you for coming. Please sit down. She took the red leather chair, her hands twisted in her lap. How's my father? She asked immediately. He made bail this morning. He should be home by now. I know. I spoke with him before I came here. He told me to answer all your questions honestly. She looked at Wolfe directly. He didn't kill that man, Mr. Wolfe. I know everyone says that, but it's true. My father would never... I believe you, Miss Fairchild, which is why we're working to prove it. But to do that, I need you to tell me everything you know about the days before Marcus Henley was killed, particularly about people who visited your home. I already told you about the Veterans Affairs man. Yes, and that was helpful, but I need to know about other visitors. Friends, associates, anyone who might have been in your father's study. Julia bit her lip. There were the usual people. My Uncle Harrison comes by regularly. Father's lawyer, Mr. Rostov, was there last week for a meeting. Some of Father's old army friends drop by occasionally. Anyone unusual? Anyone who stood out? Not really. Everyone who visits is someone Father knows. Wolfe studied her. Miss Fairchild, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you have a boyfriend your parents disapprove of? Her face flushed bright red. Who told you that? It's not important. What is important is whether this young man has ever been to your home. Yes, a few times. Has he been in your father's study? Julia's flush deepened. Once, maybe twice. But Richard would never. Richard? Richard Lansing. We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. And your parents disapprove? Yes. They think he's too old for me, that he's not from the right sort of family. But they're wrong about him. Richard is kind, intelligent, successful. What does Mr. Lansing do? He's a lawyer. Corporate law, mostly. He works for Hendricks & Stone on Madison Avenue. A lawyer. That fit with Chen's description. A man in a dark coat with a briefcase, looking professional. How old is Mr. Lansing? 35. 16 years older than Julia. No wonder her parents objected. Miss Fairchild, has Mr. Lansing ever been in your father's study alone? I don't. Maybe. I don't watch him every second. When was he last at your home? Julia thought about it. Saturday evening. He came for dinner. My parents were polite but cold. It was awful. Saturday evening, the day before the gun disappeared. Did he go into your father's study that night? I don't know. He might have. People wander around sometimes when they're at our house. Miss Fairchild, this is very important. Did Mr. Lansing know about the blackmail attempt against your father? Her eyes widened. How would he know about that? I'm asking you. I might have mentioned it. I was upset, worried about Father. Richard and I talk about everything. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. When did you tell him? Last week, Wednesday or Thursday, I think. We had lunch, and I told him Father was being blackmailed by someone from the war. Did you tell him the details? About the photographs? About the accusations? Some of it. Richard was very sympathetic. He said Father should go to the police, report the blackmail. And did you tell him your father's response? Yes. I said Father refused to pay, that he was going to confront the blackmailer directly. Wolfe and I exchanged glances. Julia Fairchild had told her boyfriend everything, the blackmail, the accusations, her father's plans, and within days, Henley was dead, and Fairchild was framed for murder. Miss Fairchild, Wolfe said gently, I need you to tell me everything you know about Richard Lansing, where he's from, how you met, what he does, who his associates are, everything. Her face had gone pale. You think Richard is involved? I think we need to investigate every possibility. Please, just tell me what you know. She did, and with every detail, the picture became clearer and more damning. Richard Lansing, according to Julia Fairchild, was everything a father wouldn't want for his 19-year-old daughter. 35 years old, sophisticated, successful, charming, and by Julia's own admission, somewhat mysterious about his past. We met at a gallery opening in May, she said, her voice small now defensive. One of those modern art things Mother dragged me to. Richard was there, and we started talking. He was intelligent, well-read. He actually listened when I spoke, treated me like an adult instead of a child. Did he know who your father was? Wolfe asked. Wolfe asked? Alex? Not at first. At least I don't think so. I didn't mention Father's name until our 3rd or 4th date. And when you did? Richard was impressed. Said Father sounded like a remarkable man, that he'd love to meet him someday. When did he meet your parents? About 2 months ago. I invited him to Sunday dinner. It was tense. Father asked him questions about his background, his family, his career. Richard answered politely, but I could tell Father didn't approve. Why didn't he approve? Julia's hands twisted in her lap. He said Richard was too smooth, too practiced. Said something about him didn't sit right. Out of the mouths of colonels, I thought. Fairchild's instincts had been correct. What do you know about Mr. Lansing's family? Wolfe asked. Not much. He said his parents died when he was young. He was raised by an uncle in Philadelphia, worked his way through law school, started at Hendricks and Stone about 5 years ago. And you verified all this? Julia looked startled. Verified? Why would I verify it? He's my boyfriend, not a criminal. Wolfe's expression suggested he thought those categories might overlap more than she realized. Miss Fairchild, when Mr. Lansing visited your home Saturday evening, do you remember what time he left? Around 9:30, I think. Maybe 10. And you were with him the entire time? Mostly. I mean, I left him alone in the drawing room for a few minutes while I helped Mother with something in the kitchen. And he went to the powder room once. But otherwise, yes. The powder room, is that near your father's study? Her face went even paler. It's across the hall, but Richard wouldn't have... Miss Fairchild, I'm not accusing him. I'm establishing facts. Did anyone see Mr. Lansing during those times he was alone? I don't know. Mrs. Brennan might have. Or Patrick. I made a note to follow up with both of them. Wolfe continued his questioning. Has Mr. Lansing ever expressed any particular interest in your father's military service? Well, yes. He asked about it several times. Where father served, what he did, whether he kept any mementos or weapons from the war. Did he ask specifically about weapons? Julia hesitated. I think so. He said his uncle had collected military firearms and he'd always found them interesting. Every answer was making it worse. Wolfe pressed on. Miss Fairchild, after you told Mr. Lansing about the blackmail last week, did he ask for the blackmailer's name? Yes. He said, if I knew who it was, he might be able to help. Use his legal connections to threaten a lawsuit or something. And did you tell him? I didn't know the name then. Father hadn't told me. But later Thursday night, I overheard Father and Uncle Harrison talking about it. They mentioned the name Marcus Henley. And did you tell Mr. Lansing this? Julia's voice was barely a whisper now. So Lansing had known Henley's name 2 days before the murder. Time enough to locate him, plan an approach, arrange a meeting. One more question, Wolfe said. Has Mr. Lansing ever mentioned knowing anyone from your father's military service? Anyone from the 44th Infantry Regiment? No, never. Wolfe leaned back. Thank you, Miss Fairchild. You've been very helpful. Mr. Wolfe, you don't really think Richard killed that man, do you? He's not violent. He's gentle, thoughtful. I think we need to investigate everyone who had means, motive and opportunity. Mr. Lansing had all three. Whether he's guilty remains to be proven. Tears were sliding down Julia's face now. I trusted him. I told him everything about my family, about Father. If he used that information to hurt Father, I'll never forgive myself. If he's guilty, Miss Fairchild, the responsibility is his, not yours. You acted in good faith. He, if he is indeed the culprit, acted with malice. I stood up. I'll get you a taxi, Miss Fairchild. She nodded mutely. I walked her to the door. The dogs had dispersed during the interview, but Loyal appeared as we reached the hallway. He padded up to Julia and sat down in front of her, looking up with those intelligent eyes. She knelt down and hugged him, burying her face in his brick-red coat. He stood perfectly still, letting her hold him, offering the only comfort he could. Good dog, she whispered. Such a good dog. I called a taxi and waited with her on the stoop. When it arrived, she climbed in without another word. Her face turned away. I went back to the office. Wolfe was on the phone with someone, speaking in curt sentences. He hung up as I entered. That was Saul. I asked him to investigate Richard Lansing's background, specifically his employment at Hendricks and Stone and his claimed history in Philadelphia. You don't think it's real? I think very little about Mr. Lansing is real. A 35-year-old lawyer pursues a 19-year-old girl whose father is a prominent war hero currently being mentioned as a political candidate. Within weeks he's meeting the family, learning about the household, asking about military weapons. Then, conveniently, a blackmailer appears threatening the father, and the daughter tells her boyfriend all the details. Days later, the blackmailer is dead, and the father is framed for murder. Wolfe's eyes were hard. That's not romance, Archie. That's reconnaissance. You think Lansing planned this from the beginning? I think Lansing targeted Julia deliberately to get access to her father. Why remains the question. I thought about it. Could be he's working for someone. A political rival who wants Fairchild destroyed before he can run for office. Or someone from the war with an old grudge. Both are plausible. Or it could be something else entirely. Wolfe reached for the phone again. I need to speak with Colonel Fairchild immediately. Call the house and arrange for him to come here at 6 o'clock. I'll need him to bring every scrap of information he has about Richard Lansing, when they met, what was discussed, anything unusual he noticed. I made the call. Mrs. Fairchild answered, sounding exhausted but relieved that her husband was home. She put the colonel on. Mr. Goodwin, has there been progress? Possibly. Mr. Wolfe needs to see you at 6 o'clock. And Colonel, we need to talk about Richard Lansing. There was a sharp intake of breath. That son of a bitch. I knew he was wrong for Julia, but I never thought. We don't know anything for certain yet, but we need information. Everything you remember about him. I'll be there at 6. He hung up. I relayed the conversation to Wolfe, who nodded with satisfaction. Good. Now we wait for Saul's report. We didn't have to wait long. The phone rang at 4:30. I picked it up. Archie, it's Saul. I've got some interesting information on Richard Lansing. Shoot. He does work at Hendricks and Stone. Started there 5 years ago, like Julia said. But before that, his employment history gets murky. There's a gap of about 3 years where I can't find any record of him working anywhere. What about law school? He graduated from Temple University School of Law in Philadelphia. That checks out. But his undergraduate degree, the one listed on his bar application, is from a college that closed in 1947. I can't verify whether he actually attended. So his credentials might be fake? Not fake exactly, more like unprovable. He passed the bar exam, so he has legal knowledge, but his background before law school is fuzzy. What about family? The dead parents, the uncle in Philadelphia? I found death records for a couple named Lansing, who died in a car accident in 1935. But their son was named Robert, not Richard. I can't find any Richard Lansing born around 1918 in Philadelphia or anywhere else in Pennsylvania. So he changed his name. Probably, or he borrowed someone else's identity. Why would a successful lawyer need to use a false identity? That's the question, isn't it? Saul paused. There's one more thing. I showed Lansing's photograph. I got it from the firm's website, to some people who work near Henley's apartment building. One of the shopkeepers on the block said he saw a man matching Lansing's description going into Henley's building twice, once about 2 weeks ago, and once on Monday night, the night of the murder. My pulse quickened. Did he see him leave Monday night? Yes, around 9:45. The shopkeeper remembered because the man was walking fast, like he was in a hurry, and he was carrying a briefcase. That matched Chen's description of the man entering Henley's building, and it put Lansing at the scene at the time of the murder. Saul, you're a genius. I know. Should I keep digging? Absolutely. Find out everything you can about Lansing's past. Real name, where he's actually from, any criminal record. Also see if you can connect him to anyone from the 44th Infantry Regiment. Will do. I hung up and told Wolfe everything. His expression remained neutral, but his fingers drummed on the desk with increasing speed, a sign his brain was working overtime. So Mr. Lansing is using a false identity, courted Julia Fairchild under false pretenses, had access to the colonel's study, knew about the blackmail, and was seen entering Henley's building the night of the murder. Wolfe's eyes opened. The case against him is circumstantial, but compelling. We need proof, something that ties him directly to the murder. We need two things, proof he stole the gun, and proof he killed Henley. The gun is the key. If we can demonstrate he took it from Fairchild's study, the rest follows. Wolfe looked at the clock. The colonel will be here in less than 90 minutes. We need to be prepared with specific questions about Lansing's access to the study. I spent the next hour reviewing my notes and preparing a timeline. At 5:30, Fritz came in to announce dinner. Roasted duck with cherry sauce, wild rice, asparagus, and a salad of butter lettuce with tarragon vinaigrette. Wolfe went to the dining room, and I followed. The dogs had their own dinner in the kitchen. Fritz prepared special meals for them, a mix of high-quality meat, vegetables, and supplements. They ate in an order determined by pack hierarchy: Caesar first, then Mars, Apollo, Minerva, Diana, and finally Loyal. No fighting, no competition, just disciplined cooperation. After dinner, Wolfe returned to the office with coffee. I cleared the dishes and joined him. At 6 o'clock precisely, the doorbell rang. Colonel Fairchild stood on the step, looking older than he had 2 days ago. The arrest, the bail hearing, the strain of being accused of murder, it had all taken a toll. His face was haggard, his eyes shadowed. But his spine was still straight, his bearing still military. Some things don't change. Fritz showed him in. The dogs recognized him from his previous visit. Caesar's tail moved slightly in acknowledgement, and the others maintained their positions without the heightened alertness they'd show for a stranger. Fairchild noticed. "Remarkable discipline," he said quietly. "They know their jobs," I replied. "Please, come in. Mr. Wolfe is waiting." In the office, Fairchild took the red leather chair. He looked at Wolfe with an expression that mixed hope and desperation. "Mr. Wolfe, Harrison told me you were making progress." "We are, but we need your help, Colonel. Specifically, we need you to tell us everything you know about Richard Lansing." Fairchild's jaw tightened. "Julia's boyfriend. Catherine told me you'd asked about him. Is he involved in this?" "We believe so, yes, but we need to establish how and when he had access to your study." Fairchild took a deep breath. "I met Lansing about 2 months ago. Julia brought him to dinner, insisted we meet him, said she was serious about him. From the moment I shook his hand, I didn't like him." "Why?" "Instinct, mostly. He was too smooth, too practiced. Everything he said sounded rehearsed. He had answers ready for every question I asked about his background, his career, his intentions toward my daughter. It felt manufactured." "Did he ask about your military service?" "Extensively. Said he admired veterans, that his uncle had served in the First World War. He asked where I'd been stationed, what battles I'd fought in, whether I kept any souvenirs." "Did you show him your weapons collection?" Fairchild's face darkened. "No, but he saw it. The case is in my study, visible from the doorway. He commented on it, asked if I still shot recreationally. I told him I did not." "Was he ever alone in your study?" "Possibly. I don't watch guests every second, and the study is accessible from the main hallway. Anyone in the house could wander in if they chose." "What about Saturday night, the night he came to dinner? Do you remember where he was at all times?" Fairchild thought about it. "He arrived at 7. We had drinks in the drawing room, dinner at 8, coffee after. He left around 9:30 or 10. I didn't track his movements minute by minute." "Did he use the powder room?" "I believe so. Once, maybe twice." "And the powder room is across from your study?" "Yes." Fairchild's expression shifted to understanding. "You think he went into my study during one of those trips? Took the gun?" "It's the most likely scenario. He had motive. Destroying you would advance someone's agenda. He had opportunity, access to your home, knowledge of your weapons, time alone in the vicinity of your study. And he had means. He's intelligent, methodical, and comfortable with deception." "But why? What did I ever do to him? I'd never met him before. Julia introduced us." "That's the question we need to answer. What connects Richard Lansing to you, or to Marcus Henley, or to someone who wants you destroyed?" Wolfe leaned forward. "Colonel, I need you to think carefully. Is there anyone from your past, from the war, from your political career, from your business dealings, who might want revenge badly enough to orchestrate something this elaborate?" Fairchild was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was troubled. "Mr. Wolfe, I've commanded men in combat, made decisions that got some of them killed. I've testified before Congress, taken positions on controversial issues, made enemies in business and politics. The list of people who might dislike me is long, but wanting revenge badly enough to commit murder and frame me for it, I can't think of anyone who'd go that far. Not even someone from Schoenfeld?" The incident was investigated. It was ruled justified. The only people who were there and might have disagreed were the 3 German officers, and they're dead. What about their families? Fairchild froze. Their families? The 3 German officers who died, they presumably had relatives, wives, children, brothers, sisters, someone who might believe they were murdered and want vengeance. I never thought about that. Fairchild's hands gripped the arms of his chair. My God, you think this is about vengeance? German vengeance for something that happened 10 years ago? It's a theory, and it would explain why Lansing is using a false identity. If he's actually German or German-American, he'd need to conceal his background to get close to your family. I thought about Saul's findings, the gaps in Lansing's employment history, the unverifiable education credentials, the borrowed identity. It all fit with someone who'd constructed a false persona to infiltrate Fairchild's life. Colonel, Wolfe said, do you remember the names of the 3 German officers who died? Of course, Captain Werner Kessler. He was the one who attacked with the knife. Lieutenant Franz Dietrich and Lieutenant Otto Vogel, they were the ones who tried to escape. And do you know anything about their backgrounds? Where they were from? Whether they had families? I read their service records after the incident. I wanted to understand who they were. Kessler was from Munich, career military, married with 2 children. Dietrich was from Hamburg, single as far as I knew. Vogel was from a small town near the Austrian border, Salzfeld, I think. He was married, no children mentioned in the records. I was writing all this down. 3 German officers, at least 2 with wives, 1 with children. Any of them could have family members who blamed Fairchild for their deaths. We need to find out if any of their relatives came to America after the war, Wolfe said, particularly anyone who might fit Lansing's age and background. How do we do that? I asked. Immigration records. Saul can handle it. He has contacts at Ellis Island and the Immigration Bureau. Have him search for anyone with the surnames Kessler, Dietrich, or Vogel who entered the country between 1945 and 1950. I made a note. Fairchild was staring at nothing, his face pale. If you're right, he said quietly, if this is about Schoenfeld, then I've brought this on my family. My daughter is involved with a man who wants to destroy me, and I didn't even know it. If we're right, Colonel, then Mr. Lansing is a criminal who manipulated your daughter to achieve his goals. The responsibility is his, not yours. That's a cold comfort when my daughter's heart is being broken and my reputation destroyed. Wolfe had no answer for that. Neither did I. The office was quiet except for the ticking clock and the faint sound of the dogs moving about the brownstone on their evening patrol. Caesar appeared in the doorway, checked on us, then continued his rounds. Mars passed by a minute later. The routine never changed. Finally, Wolfe spoke. Colonel, we're going to find Richard Lansing and prove he killed Henley. But to do that, I need you to do something difficult. What? I need you to call him. Invite him to your home tomorrow evening. Tell him you've had time to think, that you were too hard on him, that you want to give him another chance. Fairchild's expression hardened. You want me to welcome my daughter's seducer, possibly my enemy, into my home? I want you to give us an opportunity to observe him, question him, and catch him in a lie. With your cooperation and Archie's investigation, we can set a trap, but we need Lansing to walk into it voluntarily. And if he refuses, then we pursue other avenues. But I think he'll accept. He's invested considerable time and effort into his relationship with Julia. He won't abandon it easily. Fairchild was quiet, thinking. Finally he nodded. All right, I'll call him. But Mr. Wolfe, if you're wrong about this, if Lansing is innocent and I've misjudged him, then we'll have wasted an evening and owe him an apology. But I'm not wrong, Colonel. I'm rarely wrong. It wasn't modesty, just fact. Wolfe had been wrong before, but not often, and not about the big things. Fairchild stood. I'll call him tonight. What should I say? Be conciliatory. Say you've realized you were being overprotective, that Julia's happiness matters more than your prejudices. Ask him to come to dinner tomorrow at 7. Tell him it will be just family. You, your wife Julia, and him. Make it feel intimate, important. And then what? Then Mr. Goodwin and I will join you at 8:30, ostensibly to update you on the investigation. Lansing will be there, trapped by politeness. We'll have an opportunity to question him, gauge his reactions, and if necessary, provoke a confession. You think he'll confess? If he's guilty, and if we apply the right pressure, yes. Guilty men often want to boast about their cleverness. We just need to give him an audience. Fairchild looked doubtful, but willing. Very well, I'll make the call. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned back. Mr. Goodwin, do you really believe this will work? I thought about it. I believe Mr. Wolfe knows what he's doing, and I believe Richard Lansing made one critical mistake. What's that? He underestimated the colonel, thought you'd break under pressure, plead guilty to avoid scandal, sacrifice yourself to protect your family's reputation. But you didn't. You fought, and that gave us time to find the truth. Fairchild's expression softened slightly. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin, for everything. After he left, I went back to the office. Wolfe was opening a fresh bottle of beer. You really think we can trap him tomorrow night? I asked. If he comes, yes. If he doesn't, we'll know he's been warned or has grown suspicious. Either way, we'll learn something. Wolfe drank. Call Saul. I want him working through the night if necessary. We need those immigration records, and we need confirmation that Lansing was at Henley's building Monday night. The shopkeeper's identification is good, but we need more. On it. I spent the next hour on the phone with Saul, coordinating the investigation. He'd already started checking immigration records and promised to have preliminary results by morning. He'd also arranged to get access to phone records for Henley's apartment. If Lansing had called to arrange a meeting, there'd be a record. By 9 o'clock, we'd done everything we could for the day. Wolfe went up to his room to read. I stayed in the office, going over my notes, trying to see the pattern. Richard Lansing, possibly German, possibly related to one of the dead officers from Schoenfeld. He'd constructed a false identity, infiltrated the Fairchild family through Julia, learned about the household security and the weapons collection. When Henley's blackmail attempt provided an opportunity, Lansing had stolen Fairchild's gun, met with Henley, killed him, and taken the doctored photographs that would have implicated both himself and his true purpose. It was elegant. It was vicious, and if we couldn't prove it, Lansing would get away with murder while Fairchild was convicted. I heard soft footsteps and looked up. Loyal had entered the office, his brick-red coat catching the light from the desk lamp. He padded over and sat down next to my chair, looking up at me with those intelligent eyes. "Hey boy," I said quietly, reaching down to scratch behind his notched ear. "You keeping watch?" His tail moved slightly. I thought about Loyal's story, walking 200 miles to find justice for his murdered master. He'd been driven by loyalty, by love, by an unshakable belief that Nero Wolfe could make things right. Now we were trying to do the same thing for Colonel Fairchild. Find justice, prove the truth, make things right. I just hoped we were as determined as one brick-red pit bull, with a notched ear and a heart full of courage. "Come on, boy," I said, standing up. "Let's check the doors and call it a night." We did our rounds together, Loyal and I, with Caesar joining us at some point, Mars appearing from upstairs, the whole pack eventually participating in the final security sweep of the evening. The brownstone was secure, the windows bulletproof, the dogs alert. And tomorrow, we'd spring the trap on Richard Lansing. If everything went according to plan. I woke Thursday morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of rain drumming against my bedroom window. October in New York, the weather could turn on a dime, and this morning it had turned wet and grey. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs. Fritz was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, scrambled eggs with herbs, sausages, toast, fresh orange juice. The dogs were already fed and had settled into their morning positions, Caesar near the front door, Mars at the base of the stairs, Apollo checking the windows, Minerva somewhere upstairs, Diana making her circuit of the ground floor, and Loyal in his usual spot where he could see both the hallway and the office. "Good morning, Mr. Archie," Fritz said. "Mr. Wolfe left instructions that you're to call Saul as soon as you wake up." I checked my watch. 7:30. Wolfe wouldn't be down from the plant rooms until 11, which meant Saul must have found something important. I ate quickly, then went to the office and called Saul's number. He answered on the first ring, sounding like he hadn't slept. "Archie, I've got news." "Good news or complicated news?" "Both. Start with the immigration records. I found 3 people with the surname Kessler who entered the United States between 1945 and 1950. One was a woman in her 60s, wrong age and gender. One was a child, also wrong. but the third was a male, aged 23, who arrived in New York in January 1947. My pulse quickened. Name? Registered as Hans Kessler, listed his occupation as student, said he was coming to America to attend university. But here's the interesting part. I can't find any record of a Hans Kessler ever enrolling at any university in the New York area. He seems to have disappeared from official records after his entry. What was his relationship to Werner Kessler? Listed as nephew. Werner Kessler's brother had a son named Hans, born in Munich in 1923. If Werner died at Schoenfeld in April 1945 and Hans arrived in New York 2 years later, he'd have been 24, the right age, and if he blamed Fairchild for his uncle's death, he'd have motive for revenge. Saul paused. There's more. I managed to get access to phone records for Henley's apartment. There were 3 calls made to his number in the week before he died. One was from a payphone near Grand Central, one was from a payphone in Midtown, and one was from the offices of Hendricks & Stone, the law firm where Richard Lansing works. When was the call from Hendricks & Stone? Friday afternoon, October 16th, the day after Julia Fairchild told Lansing about the blackmail. So Lansing had called Henley immediately after learning about the blackmail scheme, to warn him, to threaten him, to arrange a meeting. Saul, you're a miracle worker. I'm expensive, is what I am, but yes, I'm good. I could hear the smile in his voice. There's one more thing. I showed Lansing's photo to more people near Henley's building. A waitress at a diner 2 blocks away remembers him coming in Monday evening around 8:30. She remembers because he ordered coffee but never drank it, just sat there watching the street for about 20 minutes, then left in a hurry, waiting for Fairchild to leave Henley's building. That's what I figure. He wanted to make sure the colonel was there and gone before he made his own visit. Did the waitress see where he went after he left the diner? Toward Henley's building. She watched him cross the street and disappear around the corner. It was all circumstantial, but it was piling up. Lansing had called Henley. Lansing had been in the area the night of the murder. Lansing had been seen entering Henley's building at the right time. Now we just needed to prove he'd stolen the gun and connect him definitively to the murder. Saul, can you find out anything about Hans Kessler's whereabouts between 1947 and now? Any records, any traces? I'm already on it, but it's like he vanished. No tax records, no employment records, no driver's license. Either he left the country, or he's living under a different name, or he became Richard Lansing. That's my working theory too. Keep digging. We need something concrete before tonight. Tonight? Fairchild's inviting Lansing to dinner. We're going to confront him, try to force a confession, or at least catch him in a lie. That's bold. Also dangerous if he's already killed once. I'll be armed, and we'll have the element of surprise. Good luck. Call me if you need backup. I hung up and spent the next few hours organizing everything we knew into a coherent timeline. By 11 o'clock, when Wolfe came down from the plant rooms, I had it all laid out. He settled into his chair, rang for beer, and listened while I presented the case. Hans Kessler, nephew of Werner Kessler, arrives in New York in 1947. He's 24 years old, presumably blaming Fairchild for his uncle's death. He disappears from official records, likely assumes a new identity. Sometime in the next few years, he becomes Richard Lansing, constructs a credible background, goes to law school, passes the bar. 5 years ago, he starts working at a prestigious law firm. This year, he begins courting Julia Fairchild, using her to get close to her father. Wolfe drank his beer. The timeline works, but we need to prove Kessler and Lansing are the same person. Saul's working on that, but even without definitive proof, we have enough circumstantial evidence to pressure him. If he cracks during questioning, a confession would be ideal, but not strictly necessary. If we can demonstrate his connection to the Kessler family, his false identity, his presence at Henley's building, and his access to Fairchild's gun, the police will have enough to arrest him. You think Kramer will listen? If we present it properly, yes. Kramer is stubborn but not stupid. He knows Fairchild doesn't fit the profile of a man who'd commit premeditated murder. If we can show him an alternative suspect with stronger motive and better opportunity, he'll investigate. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Mr. Goodwin, this is Colonel Fairchild. I spoke with Richard Lansing last night. He's coming to dinner tonight at 7. How did he sound? Pleased, almost smug. He said he appreciated my willingness to give him another chance, that he hoped to prove himself worthy of Julia's affection. Fairchild's voice was tight with controlled anger. It took everything I had not to tell him what I really thought. You did well, Colonel. We'll be there at 8:30 as planned. Until then, act normally. Don't give him any indication that you suspect him. Understood. Mr. Goodwin, what if you're wrong? What if Lansing isn't the killer? Then we apologize and keep investigating. But we're not wrong. After I hung up, Wolfe was watching me with those half-closed eyes. You're certain? He asked. As certain as I can be without a signed confession. Everything fits. Motive, means, opportunity, timeline. Lansing is our man. Then we need to be prepared for tonight. He's intelligent and dangerous. If he realizes we're onto him, he may do something desperate. I'll be armed, and we'll have the Fairchilds as witnesses. Nevertheless, be careful. Desperate men make dangerous choices. The rest of the day passed slowly. I called Saul twice more for updates. He'd found some promising leads on Hans Kessler's movements after arriving in New York, but nothing definitive yet. I cleaned my gun, checked the bullets, made sure everything was in working order. I reviewed my notes until I could recite the timeline from memory. At 6 o'clock, I went upstairs to change into a suit, more appropriate for a confrontation. Dark grey, conservative, professional. When I came back down, Wolfe was in the office, dressed in his usual yellow shirt and enormous jacket. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. We took a taxi to East 68th Street. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and shining under the streetlights. The Fairchild townhouse was a handsome 4-story brownstone with lights glowing in the windows. We could see shadows moving inside. The dinner party was underway. I rang the bell. Mrs. Brennan answered, her face tight with strain. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, please come in. The Colonel is expecting you. She led us to the drawing room, a large, elegant space with comfortable furniture, paintings on the walls, and a fire burning in the fireplace. Colonel Fairchild stood when we entered, his face carefully neutral. Mrs. Fairchild sat on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. Julia was in a chair near the fire, her eyes red from crying. And Richard Lansing stood by the window, holding a glass of wine, looking perfectly at ease. He was exactly as Julia had described, 35 or so, tall, well-dressed, handsome in a smooth, practiced way. Dark hair, dark eyes, a smile that suggested he was always in on some private joke. He wore an expensive suit, Italian shoes, and a watch that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. When he saw us, his smile widened. Mr. Wolfe, what an honor. The Colonel mentioned you'd been retained to help with his legal troubles. I must say, I'm impressed. Nero Wolfe himself, working to clear a man's name. This is quite the operation. Wolfe's expression didn't change. Mr. Lansing, thank you for agreeing to see us. Of course, anything I can do to help the Colonel. He's been under tremendous strain, and Julia has been so worried. Lansing crossed to Julia and put a hand on her shoulder, a possessive gesture, calculated to show intimacy. We all want this nightmare to end. As do we, Wolfe said. He lowered himself onto the sofa next to Mrs. Fairchild, who shifted slightly to give him room. I remained standing, positioning myself between Lansing and the door. Colonel Fairchild, Wolfe said, I have some questions for Mr. Lansing. With your permission. Of course. Wolfe turned his attention to Lansing. Mr. Lansing, how long have you known Miss Fairchild? About 6 months. We met at a gallery opening in May. And how long have you been practicing law? 5 years. I started at Hendricks and Stone right out of law school, which was Temple University, class of 49. And before law school, Lansing's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. I worked various jobs to save money for tuition. Nothing particularly interesting. Where did you grow up? Philadelphia. My parents died when I was young, and I was raised by an uncle. Your uncle's name? Walter Lansing. He died 3 years ago. All standard answers, all delivered smoothly, but I noticed his right hand had tightened on his wine glass. Wolfe continued, his voice mild. Mr. Lansing, do you speak German? The question seemed to catch him off guard. German? No. Why do you ask? Just curious. You see, we've been investigating the blackmail scheme against Colonel Fairchild. Marcus Henley, the victim, claimed to have photographs showing the colonel executing German prisoners during the war. It occurred to me that someone with German connections might have an interest in such photographs.
I have no German connections.
No, that's interesting, because we have reason to believe you called Marcus Henley from your office on Friday, October 16th, the day after Miss Fairchild told you about the blackmail scheme. Lansing's expression remained calm, but I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. I don't recall making any such call. Phone records don't lie, Mr. Lansing. You called Henley. Why? I think you're mistaken. I'm not, and I think you called him to arrange a meeting, to discuss the photographs, perhaps, or to negotiate terms. This is absurd. Lansing looked at Fairchild. Colonel, I don't know what Mr. Wolfe is suggesting, but I assure you, I'm suggesting, Wolfe interrupted, that you killed Marcus Henley and framed Colonel Fairchild for murder. The room went very still. Julia gasped. Mrs. Fairchild's hand went to her throat. The colonel remained motionless, watching Lansing with cold eyes. Lansing's smile had finally disappeared. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Wolfe. I hope you have evidence to support it. I have considerable evidence. Would you like to hear it? I don't think. You visited this house on Saturday, October 17th. During that visit, you were alone in the hallway near the colonel's study on at least 2 occasions, ostensibly using the powder room. That same evening, a .45 caliber Colt automatic disappeared from the colonel's weapons collection. That gun was later used to murder Marcus Henley. I didn't take any gun. You were seen near Henley's apartment building on Monday evening. A waitress at a diner 2 blocks away remembers you sitting in her restaurant from approximately 8:30 to 8:50, watching the street. Shortly after 9, you entered Henley's building. At 9:45, you left, carrying a briefcase. 15 minutes later, Marcus Henley was found dead. Lansing's face had gone pale. Who told you this? Multiple witnesses, a shopkeeper, a waitress, a tenant in Henley's building. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. But here's what's most interesting, Mr. Lansing, or should I call you Hans Kessler? Julia made a small sound of distress. Lansing's eyes had gone very hard. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Hans Kessler, nephew of Captain Werner Kessler, who died at Schoenfeld in April 1945. You immigrated to the United States in January 1947, registered as a student, then disappeared from official records. You constructed a new identity, Richard Lansing, and spent years preparing for this moment. You courted Julia to get close to her father. You learned about the household, the security, the weapons, and when Marcus Henley's blackmail scheme gave you an opportunity, you acted. You stole the colonel's gun, met with Henley, killed him, and took the photographs that would have exposed your connection to the crime. Lansing set down his wine glass very carefully. This is insane. I'm not German. I'm not related to anyone named Kessler. I'm an American lawyer who's been dating Julia Fairchild. Nothing more. Then you won't mind submitting to questioning by the police. They can verify your identity, check your fingerprints against immigration records, investigate your background. I'm not submitting to anything without my lawyer present. An interesting response for an innocent man. Lansing's control was cracking now. I could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his hands had balled into fists. You have no proof of any of this. Witness statements mean nothing. Speculation about my identity means nothing. You're desperate to save your client, so you're grasping at straws. Actually, I said quietly, we have one more piece of evidence. Everyone turned to look at me. I pulled out a photograph Saul had obtained that afternoon, an immigration photo of Hans Kessler from 9. The man in the photo was younger, thinner, with longer hair and no glasses, but the bone structure was the same, the eyes were the same, and if you knew what to look for, the resemblance to Richard Lansing was unmistakable. I handed the photograph to Wolfe, who studied it, then passed it to Colonel Fairchild. Fairchild looked at the photo, then at Lansing. My God, it's him. Lansing lunged. He moved fast, faster than I expected, grabbing Julia and pulling her in front of him like a shield. His right hand went to his jacket pocket and emerged with a small revolver. Nobody move, he said, his voice tight and hard. The smooth, cultured accent had disappeared, replaced by something harsher, German-inflected English. I will shoot her if anyone tries to stop me. Julia was crying, terrified. Mrs. Fairchild screamed. The colonel started to rise, but Lansing pressed the gun against Julia's temple. Sit down, Colonel. All of you, stay exactly where you are. I'd frozen when he pulled the gun, my hand halfway to my own weapon. Now I held very still, calculating distances, angles, opportunities. Mr. Kessler, Wolfe said calmly, this won't help you. The house is surrounded by witnesses. You can't escape. Watch me, Kessler. It was pointless to call him Lansing anymore. Back toward the door, dragging Julia with him. I'm leaving, with Julia. If anyone follows, I'll kill her. You won't get far. Far enough. Kessler's eyes were wild now, desperate. You think you're so clever, Wolfe? Figured it all out. My uncle was murdered at Schoenfeld. Your colonel shot him in cold blood, and the army covered it up. My family lost everything because of him. Everything. Your uncle attacked a guard with a knife, Fairchild said quietly. He killed one man and wounded another. He was shot while trying to escape. It was self-defense. Lies. The official report was lies. My uncle was executed, and you gave the order. I wasn't even there. More lies. Kessler was at the door now, still holding Julia. I spent 10 years planning this, 10 years building a new identity, a new life, all so I could get close enough to destroy you, and I would have succeeded if this fat fool hadn't interfered. Wolfe's expression didn't change at the insult. You've already failed, Mr. Kessler. Even if you escape with Miss Fairchild, we know who you are. The police know. Your identity is exposed. Your revenge has accomplished nothing except to prove your uncle's death was justified, because you've demonstrated the same violent instability he showed. That struck home. Kessler's face twisted with rage. Shut up. You don't know anything about honor, about family, about... He didn't finish the sentence because that's when Caesar hit him. The Doberman had appeared silently in the hallway behind Kessler. I don't know how he got into the house, whether a door was open or Fritz had let the dogs in, or they'd simply materialized the way they sometimes did. But suddenly Caesar was there. 95 pounds of muscle and training and protective instinct. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just launched himself at Kessler's gun arm with devastating precision. Kessler screamed as Caesar's jaws clamped on his wrist. The gun went flying. Julia broke free and ran to her mother. And I was moving, crossing the distance in 3 strides, my own gun out, and pointed at Kessler's head. Don't move, I said quietly. Caesar, hold. The Doberman maintained his grip, but didn't tear or shake, just held Kessler's arm immobile, his dark eyes fixed on the man's face, waiting for the next command. Kessler was sobbing now, his face contorted with pain and rage and defeat. You don't understand. You don't understand what they did. I understand perfectly, Wolfe said. You let hatred consume you. You spent 10 years nurturing a grievance instead of accepting the truth. You murdered an innocent man and tried to destroy another, and you manipulated a young woman who trusted you. That is what I understand, Mr. Kessler, and that is what you'll answer for. I heard sirens outside. Someone had called the police, probably Mrs. Brennan, who'd been hovering in the hallway when Kessler pulled the gun. Within minutes, Inspector Kramer burst through the front door with 4 uniformed officers. He stopped when he saw the tableau Kessler on the floor, with Caesar's jaws locked on his arm, me standing over them with my gun drawn, the Fairchilds huddled together on the sofa, and Wolfe sitting calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. Goodwin, what the hell? Inspector, meet Hans Kessler, also known as Richard Lansing. He murdered Marcus Henley and framed Colonel Fairchild for the crime. We have evidence, witnesses, and a confession. Well, partial confession. He admitted to the revenge motive before he tried to escape with Miss Fairchild as a hostage. Kramer looked at Kessler, then at Caesar. Is that dog going to let go? Caesar, release. The Doberman opened his jaws and backed away, but he remained alert, ready to attack again if needed. Kessler clutched his bleeding wrist, tears streaming down his face. Book him, Kramer said to his officers. Murder 1, kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon. Get a statement from everyone here, and somebody call an ambulance for his arm. As the officers hauled Kessler to his feet and cuffed him, he looked at Colonel Fairchild one last time. You killed my uncle, he said, his voice broken. You killed him and destroyed my family." "No," Fairchild said quietly. "Your uncle killed himself when he attacked my men, and you destroyed yourself when you chose revenge over truth." Kessler sagged. All the fight gone out of him. The officers led him away. Kramer turned to Wolfe. "You want to tell me how you figured this out?" "Later, Inspector. First, I suggest you send officers to Mr. Kessler's residence to search for the stolen gun and the photographs he took from Henley's apartment. You'll likely find both." "We'll do that." Kramer pulled out a cigar, bit off the end, and lit it. "I'm going to need statements from all of you, starting with you, Wolfe." "Tomorrow, Inspector." "It's late, and we're all exhausted. I'll come to the precinct first thing in the morning with a complete account." Kramer looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "Fine. Tomorrow. 9 o'clock. Don't make me come looking for you." After Kramer and his officers left, taking Kessler with them, the drawing room was very quiet. Julia was crying in her mother's arms. The colonel stood by the fireplace, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "Mr. Wolfe," he said finally, "thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet, Colonel. Thank Mr. Goodwin, who did most of the investigation, and thank your dog Caesar's intervention prevented a tragedy." I looked around. Caesar had disappeared, presumably back to wherever the rest of the pack was waiting. But Loyal had appeared in the doorway, watching us with those intelligent eyes. "That's not the Colonel's dog," I said. "He's ours, but I'll pass along the compliment." We stayed another 20 minutes, answering the family's questions, explaining how we'd unraveled Kessler's plot. Then we took our leave, promising to return when things had settled down. Outside, a taxi was waiting. We climbed in, and I gave the driver the address of the brownstone. Wolfe sat in silence for most of the ride. Finally he spoke. "Revenge is an ugly motive, Archie. It accomplishes nothing and destroys everything it touches." Kessler spent 10 years planning this. 10 years of his life, wasted on hatred. And in the end, he proved nothing except that his uncle's death was justified. If Werner Kessler was anything like his nephew, he was unstable, violent, and dangerous. His death protected others. "You think the Colonel will be all right?" "He's a strong man. He'll recover. His reputation is intact. His family is safe. That's all that matters." We reached the brownstone a few minutes later. Fritz opened the door before we could knock, and the dogs were there, all 6 of them, arranged in their usual positions. Caesar had a bandage on one paw. Apparently Kessler's wrist hadn't been the only casualty of the fight, but his tail moved when he saw us, and he accepted my praise with quiet dignity. "Good boy," I told him. "You saved Julia's life tonight." Mars appeared at Caesar's shoulder, then Apollo, Minerva, Diana, and finally Loyal. The pack complete and ready. "They're remarkable," Wolfe said quietly. "All of them." We went to the office. Wolfe settled into his chair with a fresh bottle of beer, and I collapsed at my desk. "It's nearly midnight," I said. "You want me to type up the statement for Kramer tonight, or wait until morning?" "Morning. We both need sleep." Wolfe drank deeply. "A satisfactory conclusion, Archie. Justice served, an innocent man cleared, a guilty man caught, and a young woman's heart broken. Yes, that's unfortunate. But she'll recover. She's young, resilient, and she's learned an important lesson about trust. That's a cold comfort. Perhaps. But it's the only comfort available." Wolfe set down his glass. "Go to bed, Archie. Tomorrow we'll deal with Kramer, collect our fee, and close the books on this case." I went upstairs, the dogs accompanying me, part of the way before dispersing to their nighttime positions. In my room, I hung up my suit, cleaned my gun, and climbed into bed. It had been a hell of a case, but we'd won. And in the brownstone on West 35th Street, justice complicated, messy, imperfect justice had been served. Friday morning arrived with bright sunshine and the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you forget it had rained the day before. I woke at 8, showered, and went downstairs to find Fritz already preparing breakfast. Poached eggs, Canadian bacon, toast with fresh marmalade, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. "Mr. Wolfe left word that you're to meet Inspector Kramer at 9 o'clock, Fritz said as he set the plate in front of me. "He will join you at the precinct at 10. "Why the delay?" "He said he has something to attend to first." He didn't elaborate. That was Wolfe, mysterious even with his own staff. I ate quickly, dressed in a fresh suit, and took a taxi to the precinct. Kramer was waiting in his office, looking like he'd slept about as well as I had, which is to say, not much. His desk was covered with papers, coffee cups, and ashtrays full of cigar butts. "Goodwin, sit down and start talking." I spent the next 45 minutes walking him through everything, from Harrison Pembroke's initial visit to the confrontation at the Fairchild residence. Kramer took notes, asked pointed questions, and smoked 3 cigars. "We searched Kessler's apartment this morning," he said when I finished. "Found the gun, Fairchild's .45, hidden in a locked drawer. Also found the photographs Henley was using for blackmail. They were doctored, just like you said. Someone with skill had inserted Fairchild's face into images from the Schoenfeld incident, made it look like he was there when the German officers were shot." "Henley did the doctoring himself?" "Probably. We found photo development equipment in his apartment, along with negatives and multiple versions of the same images. He'd been working on them for years, perfecting them." "And Kessler took them after he killed Henley?" "That's what it looks like. He needed to make sure the photographs disappeared so nobody could trace them back to his uncle's death. If the photos had surfaced during Fairchild's trial, someone might have started asking questions about Werner Kessler and discovered Hans Kessler's connection." "What about David Chen? You still holding him?" Kramer made a face. "Released him an hour ago. His story checks out. He was there, but he didn't kill Henley. The timeline doesn't work, and his fingerprints weren't on the murder weapon. Plus, he cooperated fully, which counts for something. He's a good man who made some bad choices." "Aren't they all?" Kramer leaned back in his chair. "Kessler's lawyer showed up this morning. Fancy midtown attorney, probably costs more per hour than I make in a week. He's already talking about diminished capacity, temporary insanity, trauma from losing his uncle. Will it work? Not a chance. Kessler spent 10 years planning this. Constructed a false identity, infiltrated a family, stole a weapon, committed premeditated murder. That's not insanity. That's cold, calculated revenge. The DA's going for murder 1, and he'll get it." The door opened, and Wolfe entered, moving with his careful precision. He lowered himself into the chair next to mine and nodded at Kramer. "Inspector, I trust Mr. Goodwin has provided a satisfactory account." "He has. I still have questions, but they can wait." Kramer pulled out a fresh cigar. "The DA wants to see you both later today. He's going to want your testimony for the grand jury." "We'll make ourselves available," Wolfe said. "Has the colonel been cleared?" "Officially? Not yet. But the DA's dropping the charges. Should be announced this afternoon." "Good." Wolfe stood up. He'd been sitting for less than 2 minutes, which had to be a record. "Inspector, if you need anything else, Mr. Goodwin will be available. I have an appointment." "An appointment? With who?" "That's my business." Wolfe headed for the door, then paused. "Inspector, I recommend you investigate Henley's activities over the past few years. I suspect you'll find he was involved in other blackmail schemes. A man doesn't develop that level of skill with photographic forgery for a single victim." Kramer's expression suggested he'd already thought of that. "We're on it." Wolfe left. I looked at Kramer. "Any idea what he's up to?" "With Wolfe? Never. But whatever it is, it'll be expensive and irritating." That was probably accurate. I spent another hour at the precinct, answering additional questions and signing a formal statement. Then I took a taxi back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, reading a book about the history of orchid cultivation in Southeast Asia. A fresh beer sat on his desk, and the dogs were arranged in their usual positions. Everything was back to normal. "Where did you go?" I asked. "To see Colonel Fairchild. I wanted to discuss the final accounting before submitting our bill." "And?" "And he's satisfied with our services. Harrison Pembroke will send a check for the balance owed $20,000, as agreed." I whistled. That's a nice payday. It's compensation for time, expertise, and risk. Mr. Kessler nearly escaped with Miss Fairchild. If Caesar hadn't intervened, the outcome might have been very different. Speaking of Caesar, how's his paw? Fritz treated it this morning. A minor cut, nothing serious. He'll recover fully. I sat down at my desk and pulled out the typewriter. "You want me to type up a final report for our files?" "Yes, include everything. Timeline, suspects, evidence, conclusion. I want a complete record." I spent the next 2 hours typing, organizing the case into a coherent narrative. By the time I finished, it was nearly 1 o'clock, time for lunch. Fritz had prepared something special: roasted chicken with herbs, potato gratin, green beans with almonds, and a salad of endive and watercress. We ate in the dining room, and for once Wolfe seemed genuinely relaxed. "A successful case," he said over coffee. "Justice served, an innocent man vindicated, a guilty man caught and confessed." Kessler didn't exactly confess. He admitted his motive in front of multiple witnesses. That's close enough. Wolfe drank his coffee. "What troubles you, Archie?" "Julia Fairchild. She trusted Kessler, loved him probably, and it was all a lie. That's going to stay with her." "It will, but she's young. She'll heal, learn, grow stronger. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most valuable." That's cold comfort. It's the only kind available in this situation. Wolfe set down his cup. Mr. Kessler chose revenge over redemption. He could have accepted his uncle's death, built a new life in America, made something meaningful of his second chance. Instead, he spent 10 years nurturing hatred and destroyed himself in the process. That's not tragedy, that's waste. I couldn't argue with that. The rest of Friday passed quietly. Saul called to congratulate us and collect his payment. He'd done excellent work, and Wolfe paid him generously. Lon Cohen called from the Gazette, wanting the inside story for the evening edition. I gave him enough to write a good piece without compromising anything Kramer needed kept confidential. At 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Fritz answered it and returned a moment later with Harrison Pembroke. Pembroke looked better than he had earlier in the week. The strain had lifted, replaced by relief and gratitude. He came into the office carrying his briefcase. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, I wanted to deliver this personally." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a check, which he placed on Wolfe's desk. $20,000, as agreed. "With my profound thanks." Wolfe picked up the check, examined it, and handed it to me. "Thank you, Mr. Pembroke. How is the Colonel?" "Exhausted but grateful. The DA called this afternoon. All charges are being dropped. There will be a press conference tomorrow morning to announce it." "And Miss Fairchild?" Pembroke's expression darkened. Devastated. She trusted Kessler, believed he loved her. Learning it was all manipulation, he shook his head. "But she's strong. She'll recover." "I'm sure she will." Wolfe paused. "Mr. Pembroke, I have a question. Did the Colonel ever doubt his own innocence, even for a moment?" Pembroke considered the question. "I don't think so. Andrew has many qualities, but self-deception isn't one of them. He knew he didn't kill Henley, so he was certain the truth would eventually emerge. That's why he hired you, not because he doubted himself, but because he knew he needed someone who could find proof. A wise decision. The wisest he could have made." Pembroke stood. "If you ever need anything, Mr. Wolfe, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. My family owes you a debt we can never fully repay." After he left, I deposited the check in the safe and returned to my desk. Wolfe was reading again, the case apparently already filed away in whatever mental cabinet he used for solved puzzles. "What now?" I asked. "Now we return to our routines. I have orchids to tend, books to read, meals to enjoy. You have your own pursuits. Life continues." "Just like that?" "Just like that. We solved the case, collected the fee, served justice. What more is there? A young woman's broken heart. A man who spent 10 years consumed by hatred. A blackmailer who created fake evidence for profit. A war incident that still haunts people a decade later. It's not exactly a tidy ending. Justice rarely is. We deal with human nature, Archie, and human nature is complicated, messy, contradictory. We can't fix everything. We can only solve the puzzle presented to us and move forward." I supposed he was right, but it still felt incomplete somehow. Saturday morning brought the newspapers, each with prominent front-page stories about the case. The Times ran a detailed piece about Kessler's decade-long revenge plot. The Herald Tribune focused on Fairchild's vindication. The Daily News went with a sensational headline, "Nazi Nephew Kills to Frame War Hero." Wolfe read them all, made disapproving sounds about the quality of the journalism, and went up to the plant rooms. I spent the morning organizing files and catching up on correspondence. At 11, when Wolfe came down, there was a visitor waiting. David Chen stood in the office, looking nervous but determined. He'd cleaned up since our last meeting. New clothes, fresh haircut, shaved. He looked almost like a different person. "Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Wolfe said. "Please sit down." Chen took the red leather chair. "I wanted to thank you for believing me when I told you I didn't kill Henley, and for proving it. We simply uncovered the truth. That's our job. Still, I'm grateful. Inspector Kramer told me I'm free to go, that I won't be charged with anything. So I wanted to ask," Chen paused, gathering courage. "I wanted to ask if you might help me with something else." "What sort of help?" "I want to see Colonel Fairchild, to apologize for not warning him sooner about Henley's scheme. I was too proud, too ashamed to go to him directly. If I had, maybe none of this would have happened." Wolfe considered this. "Mr. Chen, you're not responsible for Henley's death or Kessler's crimes. Your only error was in not trusting the Colonel's understanding. But if you wish to apologize, I can arrange a meeting." "Would you? I'd be very grateful. I'll call him today." Wolfe paused. "What will you do now? Will you remain in New York?" "I don't know. My life here has been small. Working nights, living in a boarding house, watching from the shadows. Maybe it's time for something different. Perhaps the Colonel can help. He has connections, resources. If you're looking for better employment, a fresh start, he might be willing to assist a former comrade." Chen's face showed surprise, then hope. "You think he would?" "I think he's a man who values loyalty and service. You served under him honorably during the war. That counts for something." After Chen left, I looked at Wolfe. "That was kind of you." "I'm not kind, Archie. I'm practical. Mr. Chen deserves better than his current circumstances. If the Colonel can help him, everyone benefits." "Still kind." Wolfe grunted and reached for a book. The rest of the weekend passed quietly. Sunday afternoon brought another visitor, Julia Fairchild, accompanied by her mother. They came bearing a gift, an enormous basket of flowers, fruits and gourmet items from one of the expensive shops on Madison Avenue. Mrs. Fairchild presented it to Wolfe with formal thanks. "Mr. Wolfe, we can never adequately express our gratitude. You saved my husband's life and reputation. You saved our family." "I solved a puzzle, madam. That's what I do. Nevertheless, we're profoundly grateful." She glanced at her daughter. "Julia wanted to thank you personally." Julia stepped forward. She looked older than she had a week ago. The girlishness had been replaced by something harder, wiser. Her eyes were still red from crying, but her spine was straight. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, I was a fool. I trusted someone who was using me. I told him things that nearly destroyed my father. I'm so sorry." "Miss Fairchild," Wolfe said gently, "you acted in good faith. Mr. Kessler was skilled at deception. He'd spent years perfecting his false identity. You can't blame yourself for being deceived by an expert. But I should have listened to Father. He knew something was wrong about Richard, about Hans, from the beginning. I just thought he was being overprotective. Your father's instincts were correct, but even he didn't suspect the full truth. Mr. Kessler fooled many people, not just you." Julia nodded, accepting the comfort, even if she didn't quite believe it. "I wanted to ask you something. The newspapers said Hans spent 10 years planning his revenge. 10 years of his life, consumed by hatred for my father. How does someone do that? How does someone hold on to anger that long?" Wolfe was quiet for a moment. "Grief can become twisted, Miss Fairchild. When someone we love dies violently, the pain can transform into rage. If that rage is fed rather than processed, it can consume everything else. Mr. Kessler lost his uncle, perhaps a father figure, perhaps a hero. Instead of accepting that his uncle died in combat, he chose to believe a lie, and that lie became the foundation of his entire existence. But it was all for nothing. Father didn't kill his uncle. The army investigation proved it was self-defense. Truth rarely matters to people consumed by their own narratives. Mr. Kessler needed a villain to blame, and your father became that villain. Nothing would have convinced him otherwise." Julia looked down at her hands. "I loved him, or I thought I did. Now I don't even know if the person I loved ever existed." "He didn't," I said quietly. "The man you knew was a carefully constructed fiction. The real Hans Kessler, angry, obsessed, violent. That's who he actually was. How do I trust anyone again after this?" Carefully, Wolfe said. But don't let Mr. Kessler's deception poison your capacity for trust entirely. Most people are not expert liars with decade-long revenge schemes. Most people are simply people flawed, complicated, but fundamentally honest. You'll learn to distinguish the real from the false. It takes time. After they left, I looked at Wolfe. You're getting soft in your old age. I'm not soft. I'm realistic. The girl was manipulated by a skilled predator. She deserves understanding, not recrimination. Still, that was decent of you. Don't tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation. I smiled and went back to my typing. Monday morning brought a final development. Inspector Kramer called to report that Kessler had made a full confession. His lawyer tried to stop him, Kramer said, but Kessler wanted to talk, said he was proud of what he'd accomplished, proud of the planning, the execution, the precision, called it a work of art. Charming, I said. He confirmed everything you and Wolfe figured out. He'd been tracking Fairchild for years, waiting for the right opportunity. When he learned about Julia through society pages, she'd been photographed at some charity event. He saw his opening. He arranged the accidental meeting at the gallery, courted her, got close to the family. And Henley? Henley was a bonus. Kessler had been monitoring Fairchild's old battalion members, looking for leverage. When he discovered Henley had the fake photographs and was planning blackmail, he saw a perfect opportunity. He contacted Henley, claimed to be a lawyer who could help him negotiate with Fairchild. They met several times. Henley trusted him. And then Kessler killed him and stole the photographs. Right. Used the gun he'd stolen from Fairchild's study. Made sure to leave evidence pointing to the colonel. It was elegant, in a sick way. What about the photographs themselves? What did Kessler plan to do with them? Destroy them. He couldn't risk them being analyzed. Someone might have figured out they were fakes and started asking questions about Werner Kessler. Better to make them disappear entirely. So Fairchild would have been convicted of murder based on evidence that didn't exist anymore. That was the plan, and it almost worked. After I hung up, I relayed the conversation to Wolfe. He listened without expression. A complete confession, he said when I finished. That's satisfying. Is it? Kessler's still proud of what he did. He doesn't see himself as a murderer, he sees himself as an avenger. He can see himself however he likes. The courts will see him as a murderer, and he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. That's justice. Cold justice. The only kind that matters. Wolfe opened a fresh beer. We did our job, Archie. We found the truth, proved it, and saw justice done. That's all we can do. We can't fix broken hearts or undo wasted lives. We can only solve the puzzle. And collect the fee. And collect the fee. Which reminds me, Fritz has been requesting funds for improvements to the kitchen. I believe we can afford them now. Also, the dogs need new collars. Caesar's is getting worn. Arrange it. They've earned it. I made a note and went back to my typing. Through the bulletproof windows, I could see Manhattan going about its business. Cars passing, people walking, life continuing. In the brownstone on West 35th Street, another case was closed. The files were updated. The fee was collected. Justice was served. And somewhere upstairs, 6 dogs were patrolling, watching, protecting their fortress and the people in it. All was right with the world, or as right as it ever gets. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon in early November, a letter arrived at the brownstone. Fritz brought it to the office during Wolfe's afternoon session with the orchids. I opened it and read, "Dear Mr. Wolfe and Mr. Goodwin, I wanted to write and let you know how things have turned out. Hans Kessler was indicted for murder in the 1st degree. His trial is scheduled for February. The district attorney tells me it's an open and shut case. Confession, evidence, witnesses. Kessler will spend the rest of his life in prison. The charges against me have been formally dismissed. My reputation has been restored, though the newspapers had their field day with the story. Some political colleagues have suggested I withdraw from consideration for higher office, but others have been supportive. I haven't decided yet what I'll do. Politics seems less important after everything that's happened. Julia is healing slowly. She's withdrawn from her social activities and spends most of her time reading and thinking. Catherine worries about her, but I think she's just processing everything. She's stronger than she knows. I wanted to tell you about David Chen. I took your suggestion and met with him. We talked for several hours about the war, about Schoenfeld, about what happened afterward. He apologized for not warning me about Henley sooner. I told him there was nothing to apologize for. I've offered him a position managing security for my business interests. He accepted. He starts next month. It's good to have a fellow soldier on my team, someone I can trust completely. Finally, I wanted to thank you again, not just for solving the case, but for treating Julia with kindness when she needed it most. Your words helped her more than you know. If you're ever in need of anything at all, please don't hesitate to contact me. With deepest gratitude, Colonel Andrew Fairchild. I read it aloud to Wolfe when he came down from the plant rooms at 6 o'clock. He listened without comment, drank his beer, and finally nodded. A satisfactory outcome. The Colonel is free, Mr. Chen has meaningful employment, and Miss Fairchild is recovering. Justice served and lives improved. Not everyone's life. Kessler threw his away. Mr. Kessler made his choices. We all do. He chose revenge over redemption, hatred over healing. That's on him, not us. Still, 10 years of planning, 10 years of his life consumed by a lie. Which is why revenge is foolish. It requires you to relive your injury constantly, to feed your anger daily, to sacrifice your present and future to your past. Wolfe drank more beer. The Colonel understood this. He was betrayed, framed for murder, publicly humiliated. He could spend the next 10 years seeking revenge against Kessler, but he won't. He'll move forward, build his life, serve his community. That's wisdom. And Kessler will rot in prison. As he should. He committed murder. He manipulated an innocent young woman. He tried to destroy a man who'd done him no harm. Prison is exactly where he belongs. I couldn't argue with that. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie, it's Saul. Saul, what's up? What's up?
I've got a new case, insurance fraud, complicated, probably going to take weeks. I wanted to run it by you and Mr. Wolfe, see if you're interested in consulting.
I looked at Wolfe, who was reading a catalogue of orchid suppliers. We might be. What are the details? Saul explained. It sounded interesting, complex, challenging, the kind of puzzle Wolfe enjoyed. I took notes and told Saul we'd get back to him. After I hung up, Wolfe looked up from his catalogue. New case? Possibly. Saul's got something that might interest you. Insurance fraud involving a shipping company and some missing cargo. Lots of moving parts. Tell him we'll consider it, but not until after Thanksgiving. I want at least a week of peace. You've got it. The doorbell rang. Fritz went to answer it, and a moment later returned with a package. A large box wrapped in brown paper, addressed to Wolfe. From Colonel Fairchild, Fritz said. It was delivered by messenger. Wolfe opened it carefully. Inside was a case of beer, 24 bottles of Remmers, his current favorite, along with a note. A small token of appreciation. I hope you enjoy it. AF. Wolfe examined one of the bottles, nodded with satisfaction, and instructed Fritz to store them in the refrigerator. A thoughtful gift, he said. The Colonel has good taste. In beer and in detectives. Obviously. The office settled into its usual quiet. Through the bulletproof windows, the November light was fading, streetlights coming on, the city shifting into its evening rhythm. The dogs made their rounds, Caesar checking the front, Mars patrolling upstairs, Apollo at the windows, Minerva near the stairs, Diana in the kitchen with Fritz, and Loyal in his corner, watching everything. The brownstone was secure, the case was closed. Another puzzle solved, another fee collected, another chapter in the endless book of human nature written and filed away. And in the office on West 35th Street, Nero Wolfe opened a bottle of beer. Fritz prepared dinner, and I sat at my desk thinking about honor, revenge, justice, and the complicated mess that is human existence. Some cases end cleanly. Others leave threads dangling, questions unanswered, hearts broken. This one had a bit of both. But in the end, we'd done what we always do, found the truth, proved it, and made sure justice was served. That's all anyone can do. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's enough.